Chapter 1163. In the Sacred Heart Palace. Yunyang looked at the mountain range, a sense of awe rising within him. Previously, when he looked at it from the outside, he only saw a few pavilions that occupied an area of at most a few acres. However, after entering, he realized that this place was at least a few thousand miles wide. There were mountains and valleys that stretched on endlessly. Clouds and mist floated back and forth. It was like a paradise on earth. The spiritual qi here was so rich that even Yunyang felt suffocated. From time to time, a dense mass of spiritual qi would rush over and drizzle spiritual liquid over his head. Wherever he breathed, he could smell the spiritual qi that could make his cultivation base advance by leaps and bounds. Heaven and earth treasures were everywhere he looked, and auspicious clouds surrounded him. He could hear the sound of pines rustling and the wind whistling. The Sacred Heart Palace is really a good place. Hearing that Hui Yunfeng had returned, Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning came out to greet him with surprise on their faces. They were so excited that they almost fainted. They hugged Hui Yunfeng with tears on their faces, crying, laughing, shouting, and screaming. The saint-venerable state they had cultivated for many years was gone at this moment. Pu Deshuang and the others also hurried out. The moment he saw Hui Yunfeng, Pu Deshuang's face was full of surprise, but he cursed, "I knew this scourge was not dead. This old B****starred. A scourge that lives for thousands of years. Why didn't you just F***king die outside? Bastard. Then I don't have to pay my debt." The other two attendants shook their heads angrily and said, "I'm so disappointed. I'm so disappointed." Hui Yunfeng laughed and said, "You want me dead? Are you blind? Let me tell you, there's no way you can go back on your word. I knew you were going to go back on your word, so I didn't die anyway." Ha ha ha, everyone laughed, not taking it seriously at all. Then, they stepped forward and thanked him for escorting Hui Yunfeng back. 5 or 6 attendants enthusiastically accompanied Yunyang to the place where he stayed. Then, they called their friends and began to hold a banquet. All kinds of spiritual fruits and wine were brought out like flowing water. Hui Yunfeng, on the other hand, went straight to the hall of the temple master. "How was it?" Pu Deshuang looked at Yunyang and asked with a smile, "It was very dangerous along the way, wasn't it? It said that the Golden Condor King personally came out to kill you. Us brothers were so anxious that the temple master immediately sent 200 people to meet you, but they only managed to kill a few golden condors. How did you come back? Didn't you meet the Golden Condor King?" Yunyang cursed inwardly. "What do you mean by hunting us? I'm clearly going to hunt Hui Yunfeng of the Golden Condor. It's a rare for me to be a good person, but I wasted a lot of effort. F***ck. If you only wanted to hunt me down, I would have long since used my various manifestations to escape. As for exposing my ultimate trump card, the purple jade flute, I even had to hint to that old man Hui Yunfeng to keep it a secret. It's rare for me to be a good person, but I wasted so much effort." Yunyang's mind was racing, but his expression was neither servile nor overbearing. He recounted his encounters along the way in detail. When he told them that Hui Yunfeng had been struck by the Golden Condor King's mortal-to-metal technique and that he had used fight poison with poison to cure Hui Yunfeng, they all looked dejected when he told them that Hui Yunfeng could no longer use mystical qi after being struck by the Golden Condor King's mortal-to-metal technique and that he had cast fight poison with poison treatment on him. Each of them had the cultivation base of a supreme saint, so they naturally knew what it meant for a cultivator of the same level to be unable to use mystical qi for the rest of his life. After that, he would become an existence even worse than a cripple. Hui Yunfeng only hurried over when he was half drunk. He wanted to get drunk and vent the frustration that had accumulated in the past few days. "The temple master has appointed me as the deputy supervisor of the Sacred Heart Palace's internal affairs. From now on, the martial world has nothing to do with me anymore. Hui Yunfeng's voice was filled with an indescribable sense of loss. Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning sat silently on the side, not knowing what to say. Yun Yang was also silent for a long time. After getting out of danger, Yun Yang had asked Emmy about Hui Yunfeng's physical condition in detail, especially whether there was a possibility of curing him, but Emmy's answer was mixed. Emmy told Yun Yang that there were at least 3 effective methods to eliminate the hidden metal qi in Hui Yunfeng's body, but none of them could be done in a short time. The first one was that if Emmy could improve itself and its instinctive power to a higher level, then it could give Hui Yunfeng some spirit sprout to completely eliminate the abnormality in his body. However, Emmy's upgrade had always been a big problem, and it could not be achieved without great opportunities. It was beyond Yun Yang's control, so it was a classic example of an unattainable goal. Secondly, if Yun Yang could make another breakthrough in his endless divine art, he was confident that he could eliminate the negative situation completely. Although Yun Yang had reached the peak of the 5th stage of the endless divine art for a long time, he still needed a lot of karma qi to advance. It was not something that could be gathered in a short time. As for the third one, it was one of Yun Yang's manifestation powers that he had not used for a long time, the metal elemental art. That was the cultivation method that belonged to Yun Yang's second brother, the 9 Supreme's Golden Supreme Gujio. After Yun Yang had gathered all the manifestations of the 9 Supreme's divine arts, he should have been an expert in the art of metal. However, he was adept at manipulating wind, cloud, water, fire, thunder, blood, and earth. Only wood and metal were the 2 elements that he was the most inexperienced in, and he would stop after just a little taste. Because of Emmy, all plants in the world could be controlled by the former, so Yun Yang did not need to worry about it at all. As for the latter, Yun Yang had better methods to refine rare metals and fight enemies, so these 2 powers were rarely used. Therefore, Yun Yang's understanding of the metal elemental art was only at the level of unparalleled sharpness and impregnable defense, which was also the most commonly used method to fight enemies when Golden Supreme Gujio was charging and breaking through enemy lines in the past. Emmy pointed out directly. If Yun Yang had the same level of attainment in the metal elemental art as wind and cloud divine art, he could definitely eliminate the Golden Condor King's metal elemental qi easily and even integrate it for his own use. However, with Yun Yang's current attainment and knowledge in the metal elemental art, the gap was almost incalculable and he could not do anything about it. He knew that there were many ways to cure the Golden Condor King, but they were all within reach. How could Yun Yang be in a good mood? Right, the temple master asked me to tell you that he will meet you in the afternoon. Hui Yunfeng looked at Yun Yang and said with a smile, I didn't mention the underground river. His words were somewhat meaningful, but Yun Yang understood the meaning immediately. However, what kind of person was Yun Yang? Naturally, he understood the deeper meaning behind it. Thank you, Big Brother Hua. Escorted by the stewards, they arrived at Hui Yunfeng's house. It was a large house that occupied an area of 30 to 40 acres, but the furnishings inside were extremely simple and even a little shabby. At least, it did not match Hui Yunfeng's identity as a Supreme Saint expert. This situation also made everyone present furious. Hui Yunfeng, you miser. King won so much money from me, but where did you spend it? That's right, King cheat us of our money every day. Look at how poor your house is. Where's the money? Hui Yunfeng, where's my money? Where's the money? Hui Yunfeng snorted with a cold face, completely ignoring the clamoring of the people in front of him. Yun Yang, on the other hand, could not help but be dumbfounded for a long time. Although he knew a little about Hui Yunfeng's money-grubbing nature, among the 20 or so stewards who came here, none of them had ever cheated money from Hui Yunfeng. This seemed a little extreme. Think carefully, all of you. From now on, this old man will be in charge of internal affairs. Hui Yunfeng rolled his eyes and said, a considerable part of your household expenses will come from this old man's hands. Such blatant hints caused everyone to be dumbfounded. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and give me gifts to please me. Stuart Wu began to ask for bribes. Especially those who owe me money, hurry up and send me the final sum. If you dare to delay, don't count on your family's expenses for thousands of years. Weigh the pros and cons. He cast a sidelong glance at Pu Deshuang and the others, full of provocation and provocation. Pu Deshuang jumped up, clenched his teeth, grabbed his neck, and shook him hard. You don't have any mystical chi or cultivation base, yet you still dare to threaten us? Be careful, I'll beat you 18 times a day. Have you forgotten that the mystical yellow iron says that the bigger the fist, the bigger the reason? Hee, I don't have any cultivation base now, so of course I have to focus on making money. You beat me 18 times a day. Kill me directly if you can. Not to mention 18 times, even if you beat me 18,000 times. You can't owe me a single cent less. Hui Yunfeng's eyes rolled back as he was strangled, but he still could not be subdued by force and could not be corrupted by cultivation base. Yun Yang's eyes were filled with admiration as he watched the group of servants fooling around. There was even envy in his eyes. This group of deacons had been together for thousands of years, and they were already as close as brothers. Perhaps each of them had some small flaws, such as greed, lust, or something else. But no matter what their flaws were, they had all been tolerated after being together for thousands of years. Although they quarreled and quarreled every day, the brotherhood between them had long been as strong as gold and stone and could not be shaken. At the thought of this, Yun Yang could not help but think of his brothers, whose whereabouts were unknown now. Wasn't the relationship between the 9 Supremes like this? It was a pity that the time the 9 Supremes spent together was too little, too little. Everyone was winking at Yun Yang when he was going to see the temple master in the afternoon. Our temple master likes young talents the most. Sect leader Yun, you only need to show your true colors, which are neither servile nor overbearing. Don't flatter him deliberately. Our temple master is a donkey. The more you flatter him, the angrier he will be. Yes, yes, yes. Just act as you usually do. Don't be too concerned about being pretentious. Our temple master is actually a little silly. Everyone gave Yun Yang face-to-face advice. Their harsh words were far beyond Yun Yang's expectation, and he did not know whether to laugh or cry. Is it really okay for you to talk about your temple master behind his back like this? Is it really okay? In the afternoon. Led by Pu Deshuang, Yun Yang entered the core hall of the Sacred Heart Palace, the Heavenly Heart Palace. There were only 2 guards at the entrance of the hall. When he entered, there was only a room the size of an ordinary house inside, and there were already 5 people seated inside. As Yun Yang entered, the 5 of them looked up at the same time. Sitting at the head of the table was a burly bearded man with round eyes and a leopard's head. Although he was sitting, Yun Yang estimated that he should be at least 9 feet tall if he stood up. If it was just his physical body weight, it would probably be no less than 300 catties. What a burly man, his physique was extremely strong. A thick black robe was draped over his body, but the front was unbuttoned, revealing a thick patch of chest hair. Seeing Yun Yang enter, he actually laughed with his long legs stretched out and waved his hand, saying, "You must be the leader of the residents of 9 Supremes, Yun Yang? I am Zhan Wufei. Come, 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 come. Don't be shy, don't stand on ceremony, don't stand on ceremony." For a moment, Yun Yang felt like his brain had short-circuited. To be honest, before this, Yun Yang had fantasized countless times about how the Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace, the legendary saint-level expert, Zhan Wufei, would look like. However, no matter how much he thought about it, looking at all his imaginations and fantasies, he had never thought that Zhan Wufei would actually look like this. If this fellow were to walk out, Yun Yang would only think that he was a bandit if others did not mention his identity. He was filled with the aura of a bandit from head to toe, and he did not hide it at all. The demeanor of an expert, the temperament of a senior, the dignity of a pinnacle expert, none of it was there. Not even a drop of it was there. The four people on both sides of the leader were also friendly, very refined and elegant. At least, in Yun Yang's understanding, this was what a lord of the Sacred Heart Palace should look like. However, only this lord of the Sacred Heart Palace did not match the demeanor that a lord of the Sacred Heart Palace should have in Yun Yang's mind. Yun Yang wanted to say something, but he could not think of the right words at that moment. He choked and was speechless for a long time. He had wanted to compliment the Lord with a few polite words like, "I've long heard of the Lord's great name, and now that I've seen you today, you're indeed an immortal, and you live up to your reputation." However, he could not bring himself to say such words now. If he were to say such words to this fellow, Yun Yang's guilty conscience was secondary. He was even more afraid that the other party would think that he was mocking him. "This is the assistant lord, Chun Ruoshui, this is the assistant lord, Meng Changfei, this is the assistant lord, Tian Wumeng, and this is the great elder, Lei Qianli." Zhan Wufei introduced them casually. "You're all not outsiders, sit, sit." He glared at him. "Why aren't you sitting?" Yun Yang smiled bitterly and plopped himself down on the chair, a strange feeling surging within him, lasting for a long time. Really, his worldview was ruined. "May I ask who your master is, sect leader Yun? Is it convenient for you to reveal it?" Zhan Wufei smiled. It would have been better if he had not smiled, for there was a tinge of ferocity to it. As he smiled, the curly beard on his face trembled, like a lion grinning. His words were straight to the point. The Sacred Heart Palace and most of the sects with celestial luck banners would be very interested in Yun Yang's background. This would affect their attitude towards Yun Yang and the residents of 9 Supremes in the future. "There's nothing that I can't say about my master, but forgive me for being blunt, I don't even know what my master's name is or what his title is." Yun Yang smiled bitterly. "The old man has never mentioned it, looks like he's also an eccentric old thing." Zhan Wufei was not bothered at all and said, "Old things nowadays are all eccentric, and they do things in secret, they're not at all straightforward. They're not as straightforward as they used to be when they roamed the martial world, holding their breath." The other four looked up into the sky, looking left and right. Regarding the Lord's daily mockery, they treated it as a gust of wind blowing past their ears. There was no point in pursuing it, and it would only make them more annoyed. "Sect leader Yun, what do you think?" Zhan Wufei would not let Yun Yang off the hook, asking with a glare. "What do I think?" Yun Yang was stunned. It did not seem like it was his place to express his opinion. After some thought, he said, "Actually, I think that this situation is very, very, very normal. The old seniors have roamed the martial world for thousands of years, they've seen all kinds of storms and seen all kinds of worldly affairs. They're already used to the mundane world, how can they not be tired of it? Now that they want to conceal their strength and bide their time, they want to live a few days of peace. While they're in seclusion, when they see someone or something that's tempting enough, they'll be overjoyed. It's only human nature to be eccentric when you think about it." He thought about it and said, "At least, it's not a good thing right now, but it's not necessarily a bad thing either. Let's see how many people can end their lives of seclusion and step forward when there's a big mess in the future. That's the key. I wonder if Senior thinks so." Zhan Wufei slapped his thigh and said, "F***ck. You're absolutely right, you've hit the nail on the head. It's a personal choice for those old fellows to live in seclusion. It's understandable during times of peace and has nothing to do with the grand scheme of things. However, we humans and the demon race will have a war sooner or later. Unfortunately, we humans can't enter the core of the demon race's territory, but those bastards from the demon race can enter our territory and stir up trouble. There's been more and more friction in recent years, but those old fellows are nowhere to be seen. Once the war breaks out, it'll be terrible if those old bastards get used to living in peace and don't come out. Yunyang laughed and said, I'm not as pessimistic as you, Palace Lord. I think when the war between the two races comes, those who step forward will definitely be much more than those who live in seclusion. Palace Lord, you're thinking too much. The human heart is something that everyone has. Zhang Wufei laughed and said, Yunyang, you're a good thing, and your heart is even better. I quite like your temper. Yunyang lowered his head, exasperated. I'm a good thing? May I ask what kind of good thing am I? Do you know what my heart is like? I don't even know myself, all right? There's still someone who talks like this, he must be drunk. How did such a person become the Palace Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace? Chapter 1164. I mean, you have a good heart, you're a good man. Good young man. Ha ha ha. Zhang Wufei had obviously realized his slip of the tongue and was actually laughing at his own slip of the tongue. He laughed and said, I must thank you for saving the people of the Sacred Heart Palace. They said that I have to reward you with something to show that we, the Sacred Heart Palace, know how to be grateful and repay kindness with kindness. Tell me, what should I reward you with? The 3 deputy hall masters and a grand elder covered their faces. It was already good enough that a young man dared to sit down in front of you and speak freely, but you actually wanted him to tell you what to reward him. Who would have the nerve to say it? If they did not know their lord well, the 3 deputy leaders would definitely think that their lord was stingy and was trying to bluff his way out of the situation. However, they had thought too much. Perhaps others were too embarrassed to say it, but Yunyang had the nerve to say it and ask for it. You've said that I'm a good man, why am I too embarrassed to say it? Yunyang had more or less guessed the Palace Lord's temper the moment they met. He only mused for a moment before speaking, Palace Lord, you're a straightforward man, so I'll cut to the chase. Regarding rewards and whatnot, I think, from my point of view, it's naturally about what's best, the more the merrier. Of course, it's up to the Palace Lord to decide. The Palace Lord's vast knowledge isn't something a junior like me can compare to. Cough, am I right? Zhang Wufei was stunned when he heard this. This fellow is really rude, even using words to mock me. Is he a good man? What kind of good man is he? The 3 deputy leaders and a great elder looked up as well, looking at Yunyang as if they were looking at a deity. How strange. This fellow is really bold. It's been a long time since I've seen a young man like this. The Lord looks straightforward and his actions, cough, he's also straightforward. However, he has dealt with many people in the past in such a manner, saving him a lot of follow-up. Tell me, what do you want? I'll give you whatever you want. Usually, most people would reply, it's only a small effort, I don't want anything. Therefore, a certain someone went with the flow and really didn't give anything. But now, a weirdo had appeared in front of him. You told him to ask for it himself, and he gave it to you just because he wanted it. In the end, the first thing he said was the best, and the more, the better. This time, he had been tricked by himself. Zhang Wufei grinned and said, good, I like this straightforward temper. How about this, I will give you 3 types of rewards. You can choose one of them. If you choose it, you can just take it away. Ha ha ha. The second trick of the temple master had arrived. Yunyang was all smiles as he said, may I ask which 3? Does the hall master have any recommendations? Zhang Wufei said straightforwardly, yes, I do. Personally, I recommend you to choose the first option. 200 Supreme Grade Spirit Jades. Do you know what Supreme Grade Spirit Jades are? That's a top-notch divine item for cultivation. It's a peerless treasure that can never be found in the outside world. It's rare even in the Sacred Heart Palace. I liked you the moment I saw you. I made the decision to give you 200 pieces of top-grade spiritual jades. Supreme-grade spiritual jades were high-end controlled items in the Sacred Heart Palace. They really did not exist in the outside world. Because of this, they had artificially created a situation where there was a demand for them but no supply. They could be said to be priceless treasures, and 200 pieces at that. Not only were they generous, but they were also very sincere. However, from Yunyang's point of view, it seemed that the Sacred Heart Palace had done this on purpose. They had deliberately strictly controlled the supreme-grade spiritual jades, causing the prices to be inflated. Although the reason was unclear, the truth was very clear. The true value and effect of the supreme-grade spiritual jades were actually inferior to the ethereal amethyst, which meant that they were more precious than the ethereal amethyst in the outside world. On the way back, Yunyang had heard Hu Yunfeng mention that he had gambled thousands of supreme-grade spiritual jades. Therefore, at least from Yunyang's point of view, the value of the supreme-grade spiritual jades was just that. The so-called peerless and top-notch rarity was all hyped up by the Sacred Heart Palace. Humph. How could I, Yunyang, be fooled by this? Yunyang's expression did not change as he said, on the way back, Senior Hu Yunfeng gave me some supreme-grade spiritual jades. Such rare items are enough for me to use for a long time with my meager strength. Now that we are at the front line of the final war between the human race and the demon race, I'd better keep such top-notch strategic resources as backup. I won't be greedy. Please tell me the second option, Temple Lord. Hu Yunfeng had gained a lot from the bet in the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, so he was very generous to Yunyang, his savior. He directly gave him 500 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jades, further lowering Yunyang's demand for them. How could the 200 pieces that Zhan Wufei gave him move Yunyang's heart? Zhan Wufei glanced at Yunyang in surprise and said in a deep voice, "The second option is an inherited cultivation method of the Sacred Heart Palace, called the Great Divine Skill. Practicing this cultivation method is not only pure but also one of the few elite cultivation methods known in the bound of universe that can lead straight to the saint level." The second option was so generous that it was definitely much more than the 200 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jades offered by the first option. The saint level was the peak of the bound of universe's cultivators, so it was not difficult to imagine how rare cultivation methods that could lead straight to the saint level were in this world. Yet, Zhan Wufei had given Yunyang a peerless cultivation method, which was truly generous. Yunyang coughed and said, I feel that cultivating this cultivation method is going smoothly and my progress is not yet complete, so I don't want to change my path for the time being. May I ask what the third option is? That person's honey was his poison. The endless divine art that Yunyang cultivated and the various manifestation cultivation methods were all capable of reaching the starry sky, regardless of their realms. How could a mere cultivation method that could reach the level of a saint enter Yunyang's eyes? Zhan Wufei said, "The third option is a spiritual herb, a amethyst peony. This spiritual herb is an exotic spiritual root, so its effects are extremely strong." Yunyang looked slightly disappointed as he nodded and said, "Oh. I'll take this amethyst peony then." Zhan Wufei had not had time to introduce the specific effects of the amethyst peony, but Yunyang had already chosen it. He could not help but be dumbfounded. Pft, cough, cough, the 3 deputy lords and a great elder lowered their heads abruptly, almost spitting out uncontrollably. The Lord's expression was just too strange. Zhan Wufei laughed amiably and said, "Leader Yun, are you not going to reconsider? If you're not satisfied, we can still discuss it further." "Not at all, not at all. I'm very satisfied with the third option." Yunyang said confidently, "I've always liked spiritual roots and spiritual herbs. I'm very interested in any kind of spiritual herb. Although this is the first time I've heard of this amethyst peony, and I've never seen it before, to me, the joy of watching a spiritual herb grow is already wonderful." The corners of Zhan Wufei's lips twitched subconsciously, deeply feeling that this fellow was really different from the others. Perhaps, he was too different. He actually felt that he could not tell if this fellow was really honest or just pretentious. He looked like he had no choice but to pick, but he had chosen the most valuable option out of the three. The amethyst peony. Not many people had heard of the amethyst peony, but it did not mean that it was mediocre. It had another name that was well known to all, the soul-refining flower. The soul-refining flower was an exquisite spiritual herb of the bound of universe. Only top-notch cultivators could use it, because it only had one effect: the soul would be eternally solidified after consumption. This effect was too high-end for low-level cultivators, far beyond their reach. Even if they knew about it, it was basically useless. However, for high-level cultivators, it was like having a second life. The so-called eternally solidified soul meant that even if the physical body of the user was destroyed, the soul could still live eternally in this world and not fall into the cycle of reincarnation. What's more, even if the soul was burned by a saint's fire of tempering, it would not cause too much damage to the soul. Even if the soul was shattered into pieces and scattered across the world, the soul could still gather again with the passage of time and slowly take shape. Consuming the soul-refining flower was equivalent to having an immortal body. In such a state, it was even more successful when used for possession and rebirth. Not only would there not be a situation where the soul could not fuse, but it could also wash away the original soul in the body of the possessor, preserving all the soul energy in the possessor's body. From then on, there would be no obstacles and it would be smooth sailing on the path of cultivation. In the entire bound of universe, there was only one spiritual herb that could solidify the soul. Legend had it that there was no such spiritual herb in this world. Instead, it was an almighty being who felt that his best friend had fallen and could not be resurrected. After ascending to the top, he preached to the starry sky and created this spiritual herb out of thin air. He scattered it in the bound of universe so that if his descendants obtained it, they would not have to experience the same tragedy that Zhang Wufei had gone through. The Sacred Heart Palace only had two such dream divine grade plants. As the palace lord, Zhang Wufei had always treated it like a treasure. Someone did not want the treasure to be covered in dust, so he would take it out from time to show off. Therefore, every time something like this happened, he would always take it out and display it under a different name. Those who received the reward would all choose one of the other rewards without exception. They would never pick a spiritual herb that they did not know what it was used for and whose name was not even known, and miss out on the opportunity just like that. Of course, they would not know that Zhang Wufei would be secretly pleased for a long time because of this. To put it simply, this was Zhang Wufei's bad taste. He had placed the most precious thing in front of him, which was equivalent to giving him a great opportunity. Who else could he blame if he missed it? This feeling of satisfaction had always been there. Basically, Zhang Wufei could be happy for a long time after the event every time. It had almost become a habit. However, it had never crossed his mind that he would encounter a weirdo like Yun Yang when he took it out this time. He had unwillingly taken away the Sacred Heart Palace's most precious spiritual plant. The Sacred Heart Palace only had 2 stalks of this spiritual plant. From Zhang Wufei's point of view, Yun Yang would never give up on the art of magnificence that could lead straight to the saint level. Therefore, Zhang Wufei's plan was to pretend to be generous when Yun Yang was choosing the cultivation method. "I'll give you all these spiritual jades as well." It was a display of the palace lord of the Sacred Heart Palace's grandeur. Art of magnificence was a cultivation method that could lead straight to the saint level. With Yun Yang's luck of becoming the leader of a middle-class celestial luck banner sect, how could he not want such a cultivation method? In the end, in reality, Yun Yang extended his hand and took away the amethyst peony that was not a gift but a tool used to show off. To Zhang Wufei, this was like a bolt from the blue. He was stunned. This was an unacceptable reality. This amethyst peony. Zhang Wufei was tongue-tied, not knowing what to say. He looked at the 3 deputy palace lords and great elder pleadingly. The 4 of them stared at him with perplexed eyes, then lowered their heads and shook their shoulders desperately. "Oh no, I can't take it anymore. Perhaps the four of them had been waiting for this scene for a long time, or perhaps they just wanted to see a certain hall master make a fool of himself. In any case, not a single one of them spoke for a long time. Yunyang said gratefully, "Palace Lord, you are so generous. The Sacred Heart Palace is indeed the top force in the bound of universe, to actually use such a spiritual herb as a reward. I know that this amethyst peony is another name for the famous fantasy spiritual herb, the soul-refining flower." Chapter 1165. Yunyang coughed and said no more. Leader Yun, the war between the demon race and the human race is about to begin. Zhang Wufei calmed himself down and said slowly, "When the time comes, the Sacred Heart Palace will be the first to bear the brunt. Leader Yunyang, you must seize the time to cultivate. Don't let me down." Yunyang agreed, but his mind was racing, trying to guess the meaning behind Zhang Wufei's words. Zhang Wufei chuckled and handed over a ring, saying, "Since you've already made your choice, there's a amethyst peony in here. Also, 200 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jade, they're all yours. Once the war starts, it'll be inevitable that lives will be lost. The demon race has been dormant for a long time. Once they invade, they'll come in full force. I'm not sure if we can defend ourselves." Zhang Wufei's rough face revealed an indescribable sense of heroism as he said faintly, "When the time comes, I'm afraid all the high-end martial artists will have to rush to the war immediately, in a very short time, the sects with celestial luck banners." Zhang Wufei looked at Yunyang and said word by word, "This supreme-grade spiritual jade has always been a unique cultivation aid treasure of the Sacred Heart Palace. You must make good use of it. Use it piece by piece and strive to improve your cultivation base." He had suddenly changed his tone and the topic, and it was obvious that he had only said half of what he wanted to say. There seemed to be a deeper meaning behind it. Yunyang frowned in thought and said, "Lord Palace Lord, if the Golden Condor King crossed the border this time, will there be a similar situation?" Zhang Wufei's gaze was filled with admiration. Attacks like the Golden Condor Kings have happened frequently in recent years, and it's usually after the Celestial Luck Banner contest. In the beginning, it only happened once every few hundred years. But in recent centuries, it's been happening frequently. The demon kings who crossed the border previously mainly targeted upper-class sects or directly attacked the Sacred Heart Palace. But recently, they've been targeting middle-class Celestial Luck Banners and lower-class sections. They've probably changed their strategy and are trying to take drastic measures. I have to say that this strategy is right. The damage to our side is greater than any previous time, and we've suffered heavy losses. But it's no big deal. How can there be a rainbow if there's no wind and rain? Survival of the fittest is an unchanging principle. Zhang Wufei laughed. The Sacred Heart Palace has been enjoying themselves for too long. He stood up and said, "Sect Leader Yun, I believe we'll meet again in the future." Zhang Wufei laughed and said, "Sect Leader," and he, "Sect Leader," and left. The first elder, who had been silent all this while, only let out a light laugh. He stood up shakily and left, leaving only Deputy Palace Master Chun Ruoxue behind. Chun Ruoxue looked at Yunyang for a long time before she finally nodded and said, "Leader Yun, please remember Lord Palace Lord's words." Yun was young, though, even though he was, he was. He went over Zhang Wufei's words word by word in his mind, but still could not find anything worth remembering. That Chun Ruoxue's words were just shooting at him, how could he not be confused? Zhang Wufei's words replayed in his mind, but he didn't find anything worth remembering. Chun Ruoxue's words were pointless. How could he not be confused? Chun Ruoxue did not bother to explain. She laughed and turned around to leave. In the next moment, Yunyang realized that he was already in the garden outside the hall. Then, the scenery in front of him changed. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Hui Yunfeng's courtyard. Yun Yang stared at the spiritual chi mist before him, the bewilderment in his eyes deepened, almost suspecting that what had just happened was just a dream. However, the spatial ring that he had obtained was proof that everything that had happened just now was real. There was no way it could be faked. What does it mean? That night, Hui Yunfeng held a banquet. More than 300 people came to drink, and the atmosphere was very lively. Yun Yang reminded Hui Yunfeng's relatives again, don't let him use any mystical qi. Don't let him use any of it. The whole family took note of it. Yun Yang watched as Hui Yunfeng drank and called his children and grandchildren over. They lined up neatly, including his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, 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 and the youngest son. There were more than 700 children and grandchildren in this large group. And this did not include those who were underage. It seemed that many of them were white-haired and senile. Just by looking at their faces, many of them looked more like the great ancestor than Hui Yunfeng. Hui Yunfeng ordered, kneel down and kowtow to your uncle Yun. Ancestor Yun. Yun Yang was startled. What? Ancestor Yun? How could he be so senior? Where did this theory come from? Hearing the great ancestor's order, Yun Yang hurriedly stopped the group of old men who were about to kneel. Don't. It's not appropriate. Sweat trickled down Yun Yang's forehead. Old Hua, you're the great ancestor of your descendants, so it's reasonable and legal for you to be worshipped by them. But I can't. I'm only a few years old. If I were to be worshipped by such a group of people, I wouldn't be able to accept it. Brother, this is what I should do, Hui Yunfeng said seriously. Hui Yunfeng said seriously, you saved my life. What's wrong with them bowing to the great benefactor of our clan's patriarch? What do you want to do if you refuse? Do you want me, an old man, to kowtow to you and thank you for saving my life? Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning also came to persuade him, but no matter how they tried, Yun Yang refused. What a joke. If I really let these old men call me uncle, grandpa, and ancestor Yun. Yun Yang felt his scalp tingle, his limbs stiffen, and his heart freeze at the thought of it. It's really not good. After staying for 2 days, Yun Yang finally said goodbye and left under the warm send-off of the entire Hua family. On the other side, Hui Yunfeng had begun to chase them for their debts. Pu Deshuang and the others were chased by him, their faces full of resentment. Yun Yang walked out of the Sacred Heart Palace to a remote path that was completely devoid of people. After repeatedly confirming that there was no one around, he suddenly turned into a gust of wind and drifted away leisurely. For the first time, his long-lost manifestation powers appeared in the bound of universe. Not long after Yun Yang's figure disappeared, a person abruptly appeared in the place where he disappeared, her face full of confusion. It was Chun Ruoshui, the deputy temple leader of the Sacred Heart Palace. Where did this boy go? Why did he suddenly disappear? Chun Ruoshui looked puzzled. He disappeared inexplicably. What method did he use to leave? Isn't this secret technique a little too shocking? Chun Ruoshui looked around again and again, checking all the traces, and the doubts in his heart grew. Chun Ruoshui's cultivation base was above Hui Yunfeng's and slightly higher than that of the Golden Condor Kings. With his cultivation base, he naturally would not be discovered by Yun Yang if he secretly followed him, let alone let a junior with the cultivation base of a Saint King slip away without a trace. But now the fact was contrary to common sense. No matter what method Yun Yang had used to disappear without a trace, his ability was amazing and worthy of pride. Chun Ruoshui checked again and again, but he still had no clue. With a shake of his body, he disappeared. Did Yun Yang use the wind cloud manifestation because he sensed Chun Ruoshui's tracking? Of course not. Just like Chun Ruoshui's judgment, Yun Yang really did not have that ability at the moment. Everything was just a coincidence, a stroke of luck. Yun Yang had always been cautious. After leaving the Sacred Heart Palace's perimeter, he had used the wind cloud manifestation to ensure his own safety. Who knew if the demon clan's attack had come to an end? Through his communication with Zhang Wufei, it seemed that he, a newly advanced intermediate class, was also within the target range of the demon clan's experts. Secondly, he wanted to quickly hand over his gains this time to Emmy as soon as possible. Using the wind cloud manifestation was the safest handover method at the moment. Amidst the layers of clouds, Yunyang focused his attention on the newly obtained spatial ring, confirming the amethyst peony herb within. It was better to just call it the psyche refining flower. The amethyst peony herb was really not that famous. After confirming that there was no mistake, he sent it into his deific consciousness space. Emmy squeaked happily when it saw it. The soul refining flower was extremely effective against the deific consciousness, and the soul. It was the heaven and earth treasure that Emmy lacked the most. With the soul refining flower's arrival, it could make up for this weakness to the greatest extent. Emmy planted the soul refining flower impatiently, paying attention to the large amount of chi of vitality without hesitation. The soul refining flower that had been greatly nourished recovered its vigor instantly, returning to its most flourishing state. Seeing that it could do something, Emmy used the sharp tip of its vine to gently scratch the soul refining flower. Slowly, the soul refining flower trembled slightly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the end, Emmy actually split into 3 seedlings. Each seedling was only the size of a bean, but it was entirely purple, without a hint of other colors. The soul refining flower that was universally acknowledged to be untransplantable had actually been successfully grown by Emmy into 3 seedlings. Yunyang almost fainted from the joy. This surprise could not have been any bigger. With these 3 soul refining flowers, it was no different from reversing the fates of 3 experts that were destined to die. It was truly a rare treasure that could not be bought with money. Then, Yunyang looked at the supreme-grade spiritual jade. I'd like to see what's so special about this supreme-grade spiritual jade. To think that it's been exaggerated to such an extent that it's even stronger than my ethereal amethysts. This time, Yunyang had obtained 2 large sums of supreme-grade spiritual jade from Hu Yunfeng and Zhang Wufei. However, he had been free every day, and it was only now that he had the time to take a closer look at the legendary mystical items. Yunyang observed and sensed it carefully. As expected, his eyes lit up and he felt refreshed. His vision was filled with a dense purple chi, which was truly mystical. However, among the 200 supreme-grade spiritual jade he had obtained from the Sacred Heart Palace, there was one that was slightly different. It was glowing with a lustrous white light. It was exceptionally eye-catching amidst the purple chi's brilliance. What is this? Yunyang grabbed it and saw that it was a strange communication jade slip. The reason why it was strange was probably because the quality of this communication jade slip was many times stronger than ordinary ones. Although the design was disguised, Yunyang could still tell at a glance that this was a communication jade slip made of supreme-grade spiritual jade. There's indeed another secret. It's not so easy to accept the extra supreme-grade spiritual jade. Yunyang instinctively touched the jade slip with his divine sense, but he stopped immediately. He frowned and pondered for a moment. Then, he simply followed the wind and clouds and went straight into the residence of 9 Supremes. After his trip to the Sacred Heart Palace, Yunyang felt unsafe everywhere. He had to go to an absolutely safe place to deal with it. In the Sacred Heart Palace, Zhang Wufei, who was sitting with his legs crossed, suddenly opened his eyes with a cry of surprise. He had clearly felt that his divine sense had been touched, but then, there was nothing else. Looking at the time, this kid should have gone out by now. He clearly touched the divine sense seal just now. Why is there no further movement? No, he should have opened my communication jade slip. But why didn't I sense anything at all? Unless he's in a place that's completely cut off from the rest of the world. But in this world, is there any place that can cut off the connection of my divine sense? This kid is full of mystery indeed. His providence far surpasses his peers. If I leave this to him, perhaps he can really succeed. Jean Wufei's mind was filled with thoughts, but he closed his eyes again, a look of contemplation on his bearded face. As long as this kid is a little smarter, he can go anywhere in the world. It was only when Yun Yang arrived at the residence of 9 Supremes that he really opened the communication jade slip. Just as he opened it, a soft sound was heard and a screen of light suddenly appeared before him. Inside the screen was a landscape of mountains and rivers. In the sky, countless demonic beasts were flying, blocking out the sun. There were eagles, cranes, and, there seemed to be chickens as well. Below, there were human warriors and some huge demonic beasts in human form, but they were not in a complete state. Both sides were engaged in an intense battle. Jean Wufei's voice rang out. This was the scene 7,000 years ago, when the demon race invaded. At that time, the 3 upper-class sects lost half of their forces. This battle only lasted for 10 days. When the humans reacted and wanted to launch a massive counterattack, the demon race had already retreated. Their official statement at that time was, a demon race crown prince was lost. In that battle, hundreds of human experts died and dozens of people went missing, their whereabouts unknown. Everyone didn't think much of it then, thinking that the demon race had gone crazy once. What followed was another scene. Again, flying demonic beasts came and the 2 races fought. 6,000 years ago, another war broke out. This time, hundreds of people died and dozens of people went missing. 5,000 years ago, hundreds of people died and dozens of people went missing. 1,200 years ago, there was another ambush. Some people from the middle-class celestial luck banner sects died and some went missing. 700 years ago, 15 people went missing. 300 years ago, people from the middle-class and lower-class sects went missing. 90 years ago, the middle-class and lower-class sects went missing. Recently, 6 middle-class sects were attacked one after another and 3 lower-class sects were annihilated. On the surface, only the Golden Condor King's tribe came, but many of the people who went missing were not killed by the Golden Condor King's tribe. However, there were also 44 people who went missing. Among them, 21 of the middle-class sects were seated disciples and 23 of the lower-class sects were missing. I suspect that the demon race's frequent invasions are not simply to create killing and chaos. Instead, they are more inclined to rob the human cultivators and bring them back. However, what exactly they want to do is thought-provoking and difficult to come to a conclusion. All these years, the Sacred Heart Palace is not completely inactive. However, no matter what the Sacred Heart Palace plans, the demon race knows about it in advance. No matter what arrangements they make, no matter how many ambushes they lay, the demon race will respond appropriately and suffer fewer losses. There's no doubt that there's something fishy going on in the Sacred Heart Palace. Regarding this matter, I've sent a few people to infiltrate the demon race to find out, but all the infiltrators died a violent death. Moreover, they were all found just after they went over. They didn't even have time to do anything. Even the secret arrangements that I've made in my own secret chamber will be found out by the other party. This traitor is a great misfortune for the human race. I've thought about it over and over again, but I can't come up with any countermeasures. I'm powerless. However, this matter concerns the future of the human race. We can't ignore it. We must catch the traitor in the Sacred Heart Palace as soon as possible before we can talk about the future. Sect Leader Yun. If you're interested in this matter and want to help, there's a complete set of the demon race's cultivation technique in this jade slip. Whether it's demonic power, divine consciousness, or even identity and background, it includes everything. If you're not interested, it doesn't matter. A gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. I understand. If you want to go, consume the soul-refining flower first. It guarantees that your spirit won't be destroyed under any circumstances. Zhang Wufei's words stopped abruptly. However, the image continued. What followed was a detailed roadmap, as well as a detailed introduction of the demon race. Genius 1 second remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 1166. Cough. This was not a happy reason. He would make up for it tomorrow. It was too late to write, "I am the Supreme Being." He would make up for it tomorrow based on the situation. It was currently being typed. Please wait a moment. After the content was updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest updates. Chapter 1167. After reading it, Yunyang fell silent for a long time. After a long time, he finally stood up and put away the jade slip. His expression was calm as he drifted out of the residence of 9 Supremes and hurried to the place he had built. Along the way, Yunyang's mind was in turmoil. It was rare for him to be calm. Naturally, he was thinking about the jade slip Zhang Wufei had given him and its contents. Obviously, this was a private mission that Zhang Wufei had assigned to him. Moreover, it was a top-secret mission that only Zhang Wufei, the Lord of Sacred Heart Palace, knew about. It seemed that the initiative was in his hands now, and he could accept it if he wanted to or not if he did not want to, but, was this really the case? Since Zhang Wufei had given him this, it meant that it was impossible for him not to accept it. He had even given him all the things that could prevent accidents, and even included the most detailed introduction, the meticulous route, the perfect identity and background, and even the righteousness of the entire human race. Under such a premise, if he still refused, he would be ignorant of morality, disregarding human relations, and being heartless and unjust. In short, there would be nothing good about it. He would be seeking death, and there would be no benefit in this world. This Sacred Heart Palace Lord. Is this how he thanks people? Yunyang was extremely depressed about the current situation. Isn't this a trap? He looks extremely straightforward, like a bandit, a hot-headed character without any schemes, but this hidden scheme is, King deep as the ocean. Perhaps the matter was not so complicated. Although it was dangerous, the benefits, or rather, the price, paid by the other party was also great. The soul-refining flower was a dream item that could ensure the eternal stability of the soul of the person who consumed it. Other than the 2 stalks in Zhang Wufei's hands, there might not be another one in this world. Even if there were, it would be even more difficult to obtain. This soul-refining flower was most likely a backup for this mission. The so-called gift to thank him for saving Hui Yunfeng was, in fact, only the first 2 items, supreme-grade spiritual jade and the godly might skill. Unexpectedly, he had given up the spiritual treasure and the skill and chosen the 3rd item, the amethyst peony. That was how he had managed to achieve this by a fluke. He had made this happen. If that was the case, then wouldn't his scheme against the purple crystal peony herb be a self-destructive act? If that's the case, then it's fine. If the infiltration of the demon clan was a last-minute move by Zhang Wufei, then this person's intelligence and adaptability are too terrifying. Sigh, how is it possible for a simple-minded person to reach the position of Sacred Heart Palace Lord? It should be said that I underestimated the people of the world. Yunyang sighed. This matter, I still need to think about it carefully, perhaps there is still a way, however, this matter can't be considered as me committing suicide. Since I'm already here, no matter what I choose, I'm afraid that I won't be able to escape this mission. I'm afraid that when they found out that I was escorting Hui Yunfeng back, they had already arranged for me to do this. Yunyang heaved a long sigh. The strange battle is without nothing? I don't blame you. Zhang Wufei was also helpless. There was almost no one around him that he could completely trust, so this was the only way. However, as he ran forward in the sky and let his imagination run wild, he suddenly heard the sound of metal clashing from below. A somewhat familiar yet long-lost voice guffawed, "Run, run. Ha ha ha, let's see where you can run to." A voice filled with grief and indignation said, "Lei Dong Tian, don't go too far. I'm from the Zenith Heaven sect. Your Lei family may be powerful, but our Zenith Heaven sect is not to be trifled with." The arrogant voice guffawed again. "Now that things have come to this, so what if you scream louder? I'm going to eat you up today. Scream, scream again, scream louder. Ha ha ha, this is..." As Yun Yang's thoughts raced, a sense of joy surged into his heart. Lei Dong Tian. He had unexpectedly reunited with this fellow. Speaking of which, it had been a long time since he had seen this fellow. He had been puzzled for a long time back then. How could this fellow be so arrogant that day, claiming that he would return to Tianxian soon to uproot the Four Seasons Tower and turn Mr. Nian into ashes? However, there had been no news of him after he returned to the bound of universe. Yun Yang had thought that he would never cross paths with this person again, but he had unexpectedly met him here. Of course, Yun Yang would not miss the chance to reunite with an old friend, especially one who appeared to be a brother and a friend but was actually an unresolvable grudge. He dove down quietly to see what was going on. Judging from the commotion, this fellow seemed to be robbing someone from the Zenith Heaven sect. This fellow had guts. Guts were secondary, but how could he possibly have such capability? When they had parted that day, this fellow's cultivation base was only slightly higher than the Four Seasons Tower's ice, frost, snow, sword, and the other venerable lords. At most, he was at the level of a superior supreme. He was indeed not weak back then, but he was no longer worthy of Yun Yang's attention now. Yun Yang was only hesitating whether he should kill him directly or leave him to Ji Lingxi. Back then, Ji Lingxi had hated him to the core. Below. He actually didn't choose to rob by the side of the forest. It's not some secluded place either. What kind of robbery is this? As a former robber, Yun Yang was shocked by what he saw. The place where the incident happened was a busy official road. A robbery had actually happened right in the middle of the road. For the sake of a whole circle of Lei family members, a man and a woman were trapped in the core. This was not surprising, but what was surprising was, there was another large group of people watching the show from a distance, forming a third party. Yun Yang felt dizzy at the sight before him. Is this a robbery? Isn't this too blatant? I thought the bound of universes God forbid such a robbery. Lei Dong Tian, the only person Yun Yang was familiar with, was standing boldly on a large chair that he had moved out of nowhere. His arms were behind his back as he assumed an elegant posture, his chin raised as he guffawed arrogantly, "Zenith Heaven sect, ha ha ha. So what if it's Zenith Heaven sect? How dare you snatch something that my beloved woman's younger sister's cousin's husband's brother's concubine has taken a liking to? I'll tell you clearly today, if you don't hand it over to me, today will be your burial ground. No one can save you." The reason was so compelling that it rendered Yun Yang speechless. What was even more peculiar was that Yun Yang felt a sense of familiarity from the scene once again. It was rather familiar. Yun Yang pulled someone beside him and asked, "Brother, what's going on? What's going on here? Why is it so lively here?" Looking at Yun Yang's noble bearing, he seemed to have some background, especially his outstanding looks. Naturally, the man dared not ignore him. He chuckled, his mustache twitching as he said, "Isn't this all because the two Daluo sect disciples in the middle didn't handle things properly? They reap what they sow." Yun Yang was stunned by the sudden answer. He had never thought that it would be like this. How angry were the two people from Daluo sect? Lei Dong Tian had already acted in such a manner, yet he still had to give an unscrupulous evaluation? What's going on? Can you tell me? Recently, this Mr. Lei has fallen in love with another girl. This is something that everyone in this area knows and it's not a rare occurrence. And the cause of this is, the cousin of this girl's bestie came to visit her. Coincidentally, this girl was with her bestie, so she accompanied her bestie to go shopping. Along with this cousin was her husband. He brought his brother, and his brother brought his concubine. This concubine was born with a chronic disease. Her blood was cold, and she couldn't conceive. Coincidentally, she found someone selling 9 yang grass while she was shopping. It was the medicine that could cure her chronic disease. Naturally, she went to buy it. Yun Yang's head was spinning from the complicated relationship, his mind spinning. What kind of relationship was this? You can guess what happened next. The 2 Zenith Heaven sect disciples saw the 9 yang grass first and were discussing the price. They had already reached an agreement and bought the 9 yang grass first. The brother and concubine of this cousin's husband naturally didn't want to give up, but they refused to sell it no matter what. A conflict broke out between the two sides. The 2 Deluo sect disciples wanted to leave, but the woman young Master Lei fancied couldn't stand it and went forward to stop them. In the end, she was scolded. Therefore, young Master Lei flew into a rage and mobilized the clan's thunder guards to demand an explanation. Together with the 9 yang grass. Yun Yang's mind grew increasingly muddled. You've explained it for a long time, and it's very detailed, but why do I only understand half of it? These 2 Daluo sect disciples had probably stolen something that someone related to Lei Dongtian wanted. Although their relationship was not very close. However, Lei Dongtian had to perform to please his sweetheart so that he could win her heart. This was a must. He believed that Lei Dongtian could not afford to lose face in front of the girl he liked. As a result, he directly intercepted the 2 of them here. As long as this matter was done well, he would first get the prize and then please the family of his sweetheart. Then, it would be a matter of time before he won the heart of his sweetheart. Based on this reason, he made the path of Tao of Calamity as a bystander, as high profile as he wanted to be. Brother, this isn't right. Didn't you say that the 2 Deluo sect disciples weren't particular? Why did you say that it was the 2 Deluo sect disciples who bought the item first? According to this, doesn't it mean that young Master Lei's relative wanted to forcefully buy the item from them but they didn't intend to sell it? You can't say that the Deluo sect disciples are in the wrong, can you? Perhaps they also urgently need that 9 yang grass. Yun Yang was puzzled. He spoke bluntly. Sai, this conflict depends on the other party. This is the Lei family's territory. If they refuse to let go, it means that they're not giving face to the Lei family. They've offended young Master Lei, so of course they've brought all the suffering upon themselves. The man rolled his eyes and said, young Master Lei has already made his stance clear, yet they still insist on not giving and even brought up the Deluo sect to raise their price. Isn't this an attempt to bully the weak? How is this not being particular? Yun Yang felt lightheaded and said, Big brother, it's obviously young Master Lei who's being unreasonable first. What do you mean first? Being reasonable? Brother, you're new here, aren't you? The man rolled his eyes at Yun Yang and clicked his tongue. How strange. How strange. When has our young Master Lei ever been reasonable? You don't even know this. You're lacking in martial world experience. Yun Yang's eyes widened. At this moment, Yun Yang was struck with a sudden realization as he realized where his sense of familiarity came from. This was the feeling he had when he was in Tianxian continent, watching Dong Tianling and the rest of the 4 great young masters conduct themselves. He had taken it as a fact that they were the ones who bullied the weak and acted in a domineering manner. Lei Dongtian, on the other hand, was obviously at a higher level. This fellow had already taken his unreasonableness a step further, to the point where others did not find it strange at all and came to the conclusion that young Master Lei was the unreasonable one. He was the idol and legend of the popinjays world. Even if Dong Tianling and the other 3 came together, they would still be in awe of the spectacle and admit their inferiority to him. As he spoke, the man suddenly turned to look at Yun Yang suspiciously. His eyes darted around as he asked tentatively, "Who are you? Are you not a relative of the Lei family? Then why are you dressed so nicely here?" Yun Yang was dumbfounded. "It's my habit to dress nicely. Why must I be a relative of the Lei family? I can't even dress nicely here if I'm not a relative of the Lei family. What kind of rule is this? What kind of rule is this?" Just as he was complaining in his heart, he heard the man beside him suddenly call out, young Master Lei, there's a pretty boy spy here. He's trying to find out about you. This person must be up to no good." With this shout, the surrounding people all retreated in unison. There was only one person left standing in the large, empty space. It was so eye-catching that it was impossible not to notice him. The one who remained was, of course, Yun Yang, the eldest young Master Yun, a pretty boy who was dressed nicely. At that moment, the 40 to 50 Lei guards, eldest young Master Lei, his gang of scoundrels, and the 2 Daluo sect disciples all turned to look at him in unison. Suddenly being the center of attention, Yun Yang felt like he had been f***ked. Although he had come down to meet Lei Dongtian, perhaps to settle some matters of the past, being thrown out like this was an embarrassing situation that he had never expected. The person who was talking to him was also a martial artist. Although his cultivation was not high, it was rare for a martial artist to have no moral integrity to such an extent. It was really rare to see a martial artist hugging a thick thigh to such an extent. As Lei Dongtian turned to look, he suddenly cried out in surprise, "Brother Yun." Before his voice could echo in the air, he had already dashed over and hugged Yun Yang, almost tearing up in joy. He sobbed, "Brother, I thought I would never see you again in this lifetime. You've finally come up. This is wonderful, wonderful." Being hugged by a man, Yun Yang stiffened all over, not knowing how to react for a moment. What was going on? Lei Dongtian's enthusiasm caught him off guard and he could not defend against it. Not only was Yun Yang's body stiff, even his thoughts were a little stiff. If Lei Dongtian were to use this skill on Yun Yang, he would definitely be hit. Yun Yang did not have a good impression of Lei Dongtian from the beginning, not at all. Back then, in order to cultivate his 7 emotions praxis, this fellow had chased after Ji Lingxi and the other girls for thousands of miles. He did not pursue them properly but played them like a cat catching mice. Similarly, he had used Yun Yang as a companion to cultivate the 7 emotions praxis. Of course, Yun Yang had only been using Lei Dongtian from the beginning. The desire to kill him had always been there, and it was still the same until now. All in all, the relationship between the two of them had not reached the point where they would hug upon meeting. Besides, there was still the matter of his 6th brother Supreme Thunder between him and Lei Dongtian's Lei family. There was no way he could avoid it. Brother! Brother! Lei Dongtian hugged Yun Yang, his eyes brimming with tears. "I miss you so much. It's not that I don't want to look for you, but I really can't. I've been worried about you all this time. I can't sleep at night, I'm not energetic when I cultivate during the day, I miss you when I eat, I miss you when I drink, I miss you day and night, I can't eat or sleep." Goosebumps rose all over Yun Yang's body as he stared at Lei Dongtian in a daze. All the Lei guards, as well as the crowd of onlookers, were dumbfounded and speechless for a long time without exception. This treacherous pretty boy was actually young Master Lei's brother? It looked like their relationship was not shallow either. If not for the fact that they were all men, they would have thought that they were a couple who had been separated for many years, quietly reuniting on the war-torn streets. Some of the more cunning ones instantly made the connection. As the saying goes, one doesn't know where one's feelings start. Once you look at him, it doesn't matter if he's a human or not. Not to mention that this gigolo's looks are really outstanding. Maybe it's just a possibility, cough, cough. "How have you been, Brother Lei?" Yunyang finally snapped out of his trance and struggled to push away Lei Dongtian, who was still extremely emotional and unwilling to let go. Rolling his eyes, he said, "We haven't seen each other for only a few days, why are you so passionate?" Lei Dongtian said emotionally, "Brother, you don't know how much I worry about you every day, how much I miss you, how much I miss you. There's no one else in my heart anymore." On the other side, the two Daluo sect disciples felt an indescribable sense of hopelessness when they saw that reinforcements had arrived. It looked like the 9-yang grass was destined to be lost. The young man in purple said, "We brothers have reunited after a long time, it's a great day. Let's not make things unpleasant today. Let these two from Daluo sect go." Lei Dongtian guffawed and said generously, "Yes, yes, yes. Today is a great day for us. Since my brother has spoken, let them go." As he spoke, he waved his hand and said, "Both of you are lucky today. My brother and I have reunited after a long time. I'm in a good mood, so I won't snatch the 9-yang grass from you. Leave now." A greasy-haired fellow in colorful clothes said anxiously, "Young Master Lei, the 9-yang grass." Lei Dongtian hollered, "What are you talking about? Shut the hell up. What 9-yang grass? It's a great thing that my brother is here today. Don't be ignorant. Let me tell you, if you dare to spoil my brother's mood, I'll beat you to death." The man's face turned pale. He sniffed and ducked to the side, lowering his head and daring not to speak. Only the newcomers can be heard laughing, but the old ones can be heard crying. Our young lady has not even become a newcomer yet, but she has already become an old one. What are you waiting for? Lei Dongtian turned and scowled. What are you standing there for? What are you waiting for? The man and woman were overjoyed. They bowed deeply and said, "Thank you, young Master Lei." "Thank you, young master. May I ask for this young master's name?" "I'm Xiao Yuqing and Hua Xiaorong from Daluo sect. I'll repay you generously for your help today." Yunyang smiled warmly and said, "I'm Yunyang. I've met your sect leader once during the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner. It's just a small matter today. You don't have to be so courteous. It's better for both of you to leave as soon as possible." "Thank you." The two men remembered the name and left after thanking him profusely. Watching them leave, Lei Dongtian laughed and said, "Brother, let's go for a drink." As he spoke, he took Yunyang's hand, intending to hold it and leave. Yunyang shuddered and struggled to break free. He smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Lei, I'm not used to your intimacy. It's not good to be seen by others, not good at all." "Ha ha ha." Lei Dongtian laughed arrogantly. "Brother, you're too cautious. Who dares to say a bad word about me, Lei Dongtian, within a radius of 10,000 miles? Don't worry, brother." Before his voice trailed off, he reached out to pull Yunyang again. Yunyang dodged quickly, feeling that something was wrong. This fellow. Could it be that he had actually gone mad? Why were his words and actions completely different from before? Although he used to be very warm, his attitude was still very perfunctory. Yunyang could see through the hypocrisy and condescending attitude at a glance. Now, however, that feeling was all gone. There was only sincerity, only familiarity. This was something that couldn't be faked at all. Yunyang could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. If he were Lei Dongtian, he would be very warm to his cultivation cauldron, but he would not act like this. There must be a problem here, a big problem. "Brother Lei, you seem to have changed a lot from before," Yunyang said tentatively. Lei Dongtian laughed out loud and said, "You must be wondering why my actions are so unrestrained and unrestrained. I'm treating you well, right? Let's have a good chat when the dishes are served. You'll understand once I explain and be happy for me." Yunyang nodded and said, "All right." Sure enough, there was another reason behind this, but he didn't know what it was. Could it be that this guy's 7 emotions praxis had reached the advanced level? Well, it was very likely that this guy's current cultivation level was much higher than before. All of you don't have to follow me. I'm going to have a drink with my brother. We have something to talk about in private. Go do what you need to do. Lei Dongtian waved his hand casually. Second young master, it's all right, I'm with my brother. Will he harm me? Don't worry. Let's go, brother. I'll bring you to a delicious place. We won't go home until we're drunk. As he spoke, Lei Dongtian had already dragged Yunyang far away. Only his eyeballs were left on the ground. Was this person who was loyal and generous to his friends really Lei Dongtian's young master Lei? Could it be that the gigolo was really that outstanding? After a while, both of them were already in a small tavern. It was an extremely simple tavern. Although the tavern was small, the surrounding scenery was elegant. There were plum trees in all directions. Although it was already summer and the plum blossoms had not yet bloomed, the greenery of the trees still made people feel that they were brimming with vitality. Among the trees, there was a thatched shed that was filled with the charm of the mountains. A wine flag stretched out in a slanted manner, with a huge word written on it, wine. This place used to be my Lei family's plum forest. Ever since young Miss Bai came here, I gave this plum forest to her. Young Miss Bai is proficient in the art of cooking and is even more familiar with the way of brewing wine. She can make good dishes. She's really a rare peerless beauty. She's pleasing to the eye and relaxing to look at. During this period of time, I've basically been coming here to drink wine every single day. This is considered as a unique private place. Look at this elegance, this decorations, this exquisite spirit. It's all ingenuity and ingenuity that surpasses the heavens. It's only brother like you, I absolutely won't allow anyone else to come. Miss Bai. I'm here to drink again. Lei Dongtian chattered along the way. In the end, he called out directly. An elegant voice said faintly, young Master Lei is really elegant and rich. If it were an ordinary family, young Master Lei would have gone bankrupt long ago. The words were obviously mocking Lei Dongtian for being a prodigal son. He did not hide it at all. Yunyang's first feeling was that it was going to be bad. Based on his understanding of Lei Dongtian and his way of doing things, he was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Hearing such blatant mockery, it would be considered a light punishment if he were to hit him directly. Unexpectedly, young Master Lei was well-mannered and did not mind it at all. He walked in with a laugh and led Yunyang straight up to the second floor. They found a small pavilion that was surrounded by thatched grass and sat down, laughing. It's already a great thing to be proud of one's life. Today, I have a good brother coming from afar, it's double happiness. How can I not get drunk? Good wine and good food. Come. We won't go home until we're drunk today. Let's share the sorrow of eternity. There was a hint of elegance in her words. Even the poem that was tailored was not entirely elegant. The girl's voice snorted again. Then, the sound of pots and spatulas colliding could be heard in the kitchen. I remember Brother Lei saying that the Lei family that you're from is a force in the bound of universe and is quite capable. Yunyang smiled and said, but I'm afraid it's not at the level where you can rob Daluo sect, a middle-class celestial luck banner school. I'm really impressed by what I've seen today. It turns out that Brother Lei has been hiding a lot in front of me back then. Lei Dongtian squinted and chuckled, saying, what do you mean hiding? This foolish brother of mine was like that back then. Now, it's just that we've met again in these 2 years. Oh. May I ask what great opportunity my brother has had to change so much? Even if you don't ask, I'll explain it to you in detail. This is a great opportunity for the Lei family, Lei Dongtian laughed. 2 years ago, someone suddenly came looking for us and said that the Lei family is the direct descendant of our elder ancestor who had wandered outside. Now, of course, we're returning to the family. Later, when we were sorted according to the genealogy, I found out that our elder ancestor has always been alive. Back then, it was only because of some issues of family interests that our ancestor made a mistake and was chased out of the mansion. However, thousands of years have passed. Elder ancestor feels that the family is incomplete and that it's not a good thing for the bloodline to wither. Therefore, he asked us to return to the family. The tree is thousands of feet tall, and the fallen leaves return to their roots. After all, we're of the same breath and branch. Lei Dongtian could not help but look like he wanted to show off. Brother, do you know who our elder ancestor is? A silhouette flashed across Yun Yang's mind, but he still asked, I wonder who the elder ancestor is? Heh. You'll be shocked if I tell you. Lei Dongtian snorted and said proudly, our elder ancestor is actually someone we couldn't even dream of reaching before, the great elder of the Sacred Heart Palace. The fifth most powerful person in the Sacred Heart Palace. Lei Dongtian's face was full of glory and pride. His face was full of pride and he was in high spirits. Yun Yang's face was also instantly filled with shock. It's actually, really, unexpected, such a pleasant surprise. However, in his heart, he thought, it really is him. So the Lei family has changed so much. It's actually because the great elder of the Sacred Heart Palace has recognized them as relatives. However, there's something strange about this matter. It's understandable that this great elder has survived for thousands of years, but isn't it a little ridiculous to say that he doesn't know that his descendants are outside until now? It's even more ridiculous to say that he wants to recognize them. Wouldn't he have done it a long time ago if he really wanted to? Why did he have to wait until now? Thousands of years have passed, and dozens of people have died. Only now does he want to recognize them. No matter how I think about it, there's something indescribably strange about it. Brother, didn't you say that? I've changed? Lei Dongtian said proudly, I can't not change. Since I've recognized my ancestors, my previous cultivation method is simply sh*t compared to the elder ancestors' cultivation method. The 7 emotions praxis and the transplanting of experts remains into the body are all inferior cultivation methods. How can I not abandon them as soon as possible? Therefore, the entire Lei family has destroyed our original foundation and recultivated the exclusive Lei family cultivation method passed down by the elder ancestor. That's why I can be so powerful now. I have to say that the elder ancestor's cultivation method is really amazing. This is the cultivation method that is most suitable for the Lei family's direct descendants, Lei Dongtian sighed. It seemed that the change in this fellow's temperament was most likely due to the destruction of the 7 emotions praxis, resulting in a backlash and a sharp change in his temperament. As expected, Lei Dongtian then looked a little bashful and said, speaking of the 7 emotions praxis, this foolish brother has a great deal of guilt towards you. When I was with you in the past, you were sincere to me, but I had other requests. I harbored evil intentions and plotted against you. The 7 emotions praxis is truly an evil cultivation method, extremely unbearable. When I returned to the family this time, of course, the cultivation method was destroyed at once. However, this cultivation method has a profound effect on one's temperament. Towards the end, he raised his wine goblet in embarrassment and looked at Yun Yang before draining it in one gulp. I knew that this fellow had suffered a backlash. Just from the way he speaks, how can there be no reason? Yun Yang pondered. Back then, Lei Dongtian had secretly schemed to use Yun Yang as a cauldron to cultivate the 7 emotions' divine skill. He had already cultivated it to a profound level. He only needed to betray Yun Yang once to cause him heartache, and the path of friendship related to Yun Yang would be considered a success. Lei Dongtian's cultivation base would then advance to another level. Back then, Lei Dongtian had used this cultivation method to suppress the 4 venerable lords of frost, snow, sword, and sword. Its power was remarkable, but he was immediately suppressed by Mr. Nian. He was severely injured and had to flee for his life. Naturally, he had no time to target Yun Yang, the cauldron. He could only bury Yun Yang's deep friendship with him and his deep apologies to Yun Yang deep in his heart. After that, the Lei family changed and returned to its roots. The entire family turned to cultivate a brand new cultivation method of a higher level. All the previous cultivation achievements had gone up in flames. It was still unknown if the rest of the Lei family had other hidden dangers, but Lei Dongtian's was obvious. The 7 emotions praxis was based on the heart, so the backlash on the heart was especially severe. Yun Yang had been pretending to be courteous back then, but Lei Dongtian did not know about it. He had truly treated Yun Yang as his bosom friend. Once his cultivation method had backfired, he was filled with remorse for his hypocrisy in the past and had turned all of it into true feelings, without any pretense. To use an inappropriate analogy, even if Yun Yang were to stab him now and cause him to go bankrupt and break up his family, even if Yun Yang were to do something to him, he would still think that Yun Yang was his good brother, a brother who treated him with all his heart. He must have his reasons for doing this and treating me like this. I must understand him, cooperate with him, and treat him better. Lei Dongtian was definitely not a good person. Throughout his entire life, he might not even have a bit of sincerity towards his own parents, his wife, and his son. However, there was still one person in this world who could make him give up everything without any regrets. That person was Yun Yang. Chapter 1168. To Lei Dongtian, Yun Yang was now his biological brother. No, what was a biological brother? How could a biological brother compare to a 10,000th of Brother Yun? Brother Yun was irreplaceable and incomparable. He was the love of his life. This was probably Lei Dongtian's mentality. It was also the embodiment of the 7 emotions praxis extremely domineering backlash. Understanding this, Yun Yang was also helpless in this situation. He understood the cause and effect almost instantly. This was the biggest disadvantage of cultivating the arcane method of the mind. There was no need to use his brain at all. This scoundrel had actually treated him as a true friend, a true brother. However, the problem was, Yun Yang did not want to have a brother like him. Putting aside the unresolved grudge with Ji Lingxi in the fact that Yun Yang had risked being a cultivation vessel, it was impossible for Yun Yang to have a brother like Lei Dongtian with the blood feud of his 6th brother, Supreme Thunder. However, this brotherhood was destined not to last long. Lei Dongtian's current state was due to the backlash of his cultivation method, but once his cultivation reached a certain level and the backlash of the cultivation method was eliminated, the first person Lei Dongtian would kill would be his brother. He had to ask more questions while this child was still mentally ill. Sigh. Brother Lei, I heard that your Lei family used to have a good-for-nothing, but because his parents were dead, he was chased out of the family 10 years ago and no one knows where he went. It was said that he had 8 innately awakened chakras and was gifted. Yun Yang asked. 8 innately awakened chakras? Oh. You mean Lei Mufeng, that good-for-nothing. Lei Dongtian did not take it seriously and said, there is indeed such a thing. That Trash's natural talent is limited, and his natural endowment is insufficient, yet he just happened to occupy a position and monopolize resources. My mother and father naturally couldn't stand it. The path of cultivation has always been the survival of the fittest, and the strong come first. That Trash is nothing, yet he still wants to occupy a good position. Isn't that just courting death? Isn't it a matter of course to get rid of him? Yun Yang's expression remained unchanged as he said, I see. However, this Lei Mufeng, according to what you said, he should be your cousin? Lei Dongtian rolled his eyes. He should be my younger cousin. Brother Yun, why are you so interested in that good-for-nothing? Yun Yang's eyes were filled with nostalgia as he said, that was also, a very, very good, friend of mine. As he said this, sixth brother's voice and smile suddenly appeared in his mind. His heart ached. Sixth brother should be dead in every sense of the word. At the same time, he was staring at Lei Dongqian's face to see if there was any change in his emotions. He was testing the bottom line of Lei Dongqian's tolerance. The countercharge of the cultivation method had caused Lei Dongqian's loyalty to him to deepen, but to what extent, Yun Yang could not predict. He didn't know how long this loyalty would last. Friend. Lei Dongtian was a little jealous. He snorted and said, what kind of friend? How could we treat each other with such sincerity? Yun Yang coughed and said, even if there's a gap, it's not that far. I seem to have a special affinity with you Lei people. Lei Dongtian laughed. I think so too. Yun Yang took the opportunity to change the topic. Your cousin brother. Lei Mufeng, he's not a bad person. When we were together back then, everyone felt that he was a good person. Why was he suddenly chased out? Lei Dongtian smiled faintly and said, character doesn't represent ability. Yun Yang raised his wine cup and said sadly, Lei Mufeng is dead. Lei Dongtian's eyes shone. Oh. I couldn't find him for so many years. So he's dead? You're looking for him? I'm looking for him to kill him, of course. Kill him? Lei Dongtian smiled coldly. Of course I'm going to kill him. Do you think I'm going to let him come back and take over as the family leader? Yun Yang feigned an interested expression. What actually happened back then? Can Brother Lei explain it to me? Lei Dongtian mused, looking like he was in a difficult position. Yun Yang said, Lei Mufeng's father was the family leader of the Lei family, wasn't he? Why did both his parents die in one night? Why were they chased out? I feel that there must be a reason for all these. When Yun Yang said this, there was a strong sense of caution in his heart. Would Lei Dongtian have any bad reactions? What if he suspected Yun Yang or attacked him directly? Yun Yang would have to strike first to gain the upper hand. As it turned out, Yun Yang was worrying too much. Lei Dongtian was currently at the peak of his brotherly bond. How could he suspect Yun Yang? He was just hesitating whether he should reveal the family's dark history. After a moment of hesitation, he decided that it was best to be honest with his brother. How can there be no reason? Lei Dongtian looked around and said, Brother, I'm only telling you these words. You must never leak it out. Yun Yang nodded vigorously. Don't worry, Brother Lei. I won't speak carelessly. Back then, Lei Mufeng's father, Lei Junping, was in charge of the Lei family. I have to say that my second uncle was indeed outstanding. In his hands, the family was thriving day by day. He was a capable man. The Lei family was only a small family with a lower-class celestial luck banner. However, under my second uncle's control, the family's ability grew to the point where it could compete for a middle-class celestial luck banner. There was a high chance that it would succeed. Of course, the old man was jealous. After all, how could he not want to be in this position? So, I used some tricks to make second uncle's family suddenly have an accident, and they died. Since the head of the family is dead, the only one who can inherit the position is my old man. Lei Dongtian said proudly, doesn't this mean that we have everything we need? Yun Yang was puzzled. Since the head of the family is dead, it should be his son who inherits the position, shouldn't it? Lei Dongtian snorted and said, how could it be his turn? There were many people in his family back then. Lei Mufeng had 2 elder brothers, 1 younger brother, and 1 younger sister. They were all talented martial artists in the family, but in that accident, all of them died a violent death and became corpses. No matter how talented they are, they are just corpses when they die. Lei Mufeng is lucky that he didn't die. Lei Dongtian snorted. Even if he didn't die, it's useless now. He has 8 innately awakened chakras, which is lower than all of us. The old man only used a little trick. The family will rank and eliminate all those who are below 9 innately awakened chakras. We can't waste resources. Lei Mufeng has no chance at all. I have to say, the old man is really King vicious. Lei Dongtian's face was full of admiration. That's how a real man should be. Genius. 1 second to remember this website's address. Mobile version. Chapter 1169. However, your old man's cultivation base shouldn't be as good as the family head's, right? Yunyang said, in a family like yours, the strong should be respected. Besides, if there were such good conditions back then, why didn't your old man rush up after he inherited the position? Lei Dongtian looked a little embarrassed as he said, of course, he did it in collaboration with others. It's related to other sects. Yunyang coughed and rolled his eyes, saying, colluding with external enemies, to suppress my own family, how can I get power without paying the price? Lei Dongtian chuckled coldly. However, after Lei Juanping's people were wiped out, the family's strength has regressed a little. Yunyang sighed inwardly. The family's power struggle had cost them the chance to take a big step forward. This kind of internal strife, could it be that becoming the family head was more important than the family's rise to the celestial luck banner? A man can't be powerless for a day. Lei Dongtian's eyes were vicious as he drank the wine in one gulp. If I had another chance, the ending would be the same. Yunyang sighed and nodded deeply. I see. He thought to himself, it seems that sixth brother was lucky to escape death back then and probably suspected that there was something fishy about his parents' death. However, the main culprit was the Celestial Luck Banner School, an enemy he couldn't shake alone. Naturally, he missed the chance to know that the real murderer was his eldest uncle. Lei Mufeng disappeared from then on. Did no elders in the family speak up for him? Yunyang asked in surprise. How could anyone speak up for him? Lei Dongtian sneered. Humans are all selfish things. The tea cools when the person is gone. This is how the world works. Helping him is tantamount to offending the Kangwu Union and inviting trouble upon oneself. Who would speak up for a dead family? Who would speak up for a guy who is sure to be useless and has no future? How glorious Lei Mufeng was before, how miserable he was after the incident. What's more, his father's loyal followers have long been drugged and crippled. Lei Mufeng is smart too. After leaving the family, he immediately concealed his identity and disappeared. I'm very surprised. Lei Dongtian sneered, I think this guy also knows that if he continues to stay here, he will die. So he ran to another place to live. It's just that with his escape, all the arrangements that I've made are completely useless. You've chased me for more than 10 times, yet you haven't sent back any good news. You can be considered to be very scheming. Yunyang gritted his teeth and said, I think, since they're already at the end of their tether, there's only one bloodline left. There's nothing wrong with giving them a way out. What's more, they're blood relatives. Lei Dongtian guffawed and pointed a finger at Yunyang. Brother, oh brother, your way of thinking is commendable to us brothers, but to those who are destined to oppose you, it is only a soft-heartedness. When we roam Jianghu, the biggest taboo is this kind of soft-heartedness. If we don't remove the roots, the weeds will grow again when the spring breeze blows. Yunyang could not help the sharpness in his eyes. Why do you have to put him to death? After all, he's your cousin. Lei Dongtian smiled eerily and said, if Lei Mufeng doesn't die, it's like a fishbone stuck in my throat. I won't be able to eat or sleep in peace for the rest of my life. Who cares if he's a brother or not? Yunyang clapped his hands and shouted, "Good! What a restless sleep! Your father must have felt the same way back then." After fulfilling his long-cherished wish to take charge of the Lei family, he must have had a grand plan to revitalize the Lei family. Lei Dongtian's expression turned awkward again. The Seven Stars sect's conduct is extremely unethical. We've agreed that they would not harm the Lei family other than Lei Juanping's family. However, they have privately spread the characteristics of the Lei family's cultivation method everywhere. Lei family's cultivation method is known to outsiders, and they've been continuously stirred up by external enemies. Their power has been continuously damaged. If the Lei family still had the foundation of the past, why would I need to cultivate the evil cultivation method, praxis of 7 emotions? Why would I covet the so-called remains of the God of God? Yunyang thought to himself, serves you right. After a pause, he continued, now that Lei Mufeng is dead, brother Lei, you should let go of this worry and sleep in peace. Lei Dongtian laughed and said, brother, you've brought me good luck. You've lifted the boulder in my heart the moment you arrived. Brother, don't think too much. I'm loyal to you and will never turn against you. We're brothers who have gone through life and death together. How can others compare to us? Yunyang chuckled and raised his glass. His voice was deep as he said, of course, of course. We're brothers who have gone through life and death together. Lei Dongtian was overjoyed. Yes, yes, brothers who have gone through life and death together. I like this sentence. Brother, come, let's have a good drink. As your brother, I welcome you to the bound of universe. Lei Dongtian laughed and raised his glass. I especially want to thank you for bringing the news of Lei Mufeng's death. It's a double blessing, I'm very happy. Yunyang smiled knowingly and raised his goblet. With a loud clang, the 2 goblets collided with each other. Both of them drained their glasses in one gulp. Maybe you're in a good mood. Yunyang murmured in his heart, but you've never thought that there are real brothers in this world. 6th brother can't come and collect this debt by himself, but his brother can. This blood debt of the Lei family can't be avoided no matter what. As for the Kangwu Union, you have to pay for what you've done. You've annihilated 6th brother's entire family. Your school, your legacy, should cease to exist as well. Finally, they were drunk and full. Miss Bai had come out as well. She was a beauty in the making, the type that people would want to take pity on. Towards Lei Dongtian, she was inseparable. She was as beautiful as a peach and as cold as frost, yet, she maintained a subtle distance. She did not let Lei Dongtian take advantage of her, nor did she let him give up. She captivated Lei Dongtian completely. However, Yunyang could tell at a glance that something was amiss. This lady's cultivation base was very high. She had at least reached the standard of a 3rd-level Saint King. Perhaps no one in the entire Lei family could surpass such a cultivation base. Such a lady had hidden her cultivation base and came here to befriend Lei Dongtian. She had even displayed a deliberate charm. What was the reason for this? Yunyang was suspicious, but he smiled and said, Miss Bai is indeed as beautiful as Brother Lei has said, a peerless beauty. Miss Bai smiled and said, young Master Yun has overpraised me. Bai Zhenjun is only an ordinary lady, I don't deserve such a high compliment. Yunyang laughed, revealing an unruly air as he said, how long has Miss Bai been here? Is there anything you lack in life? Don't be shy. Bai Zhenjun smiled reservedly and said faintly, I've been here for more than 2 years. Thank you for young Master Yun's concern, but, after such a long time, everything necessary for life has long been prepared. One's life in this world is to live a peaceful and joyful life. It's enough as one wishes. Her faint smile was nonchalant, obviously treating Yunyang as a lecherous popinjay like Lei Dongtian. She did not care about him at all. It's been more than 2 years. Yunyang laughed, looking drunk. Brother Lei, you're too slow. It's been 2 years, yet, ha ha ha. Lei Dongtian blushed. Miss Bai is a fairy incarnate, how can you blaspheme her? Both of them left, laughing. Bai Zhenjun watched the two of them leave with a look of disdain on her face. She then turned and said faintly, why did such a person suddenly appear beside Lei Dongtian? I'm afraid there might be more problems. Investigate, I want to see what kind of person he is. There was a commotion in the shadows, and an ethereal voice said, have you found anything, miss? Young Master Yun may look like a popinjay, but I feel that his gaze is very sharp. Bai Zhenjun said, besides, his cultivation base seems to be only at the saint level. But I feel that something is not right. I don't want to make any mistakes, nor do I want any accidents to happen. Something doesn't feel right. The ethereal voice in the shadows murmured, and then disappeared without a trace. The space regained its peace. On the way, Yunyang asked, Brother Lei, the Lei family's return to the ancestral home should have happened 2 years ago, right? Lei Dongtian was not wary of Yunyang at all, so he answered immediately, more or less, about 2.5 years ago. In other words, when the Lei family returned, this Miss Bai was already here? Yes, it should have been during the return. Lei Dongtian said uncertainly, anyway, when Miss Bai came, she took a liking to me. She hasn't left until now. This is the most important thing. Yunyang chuckled inwardly, indeed, she has taken a liking to you. I just don't know how old this young Miss Bai. Is she an old demon? Lei Dongtian brought Yunyang into the Lei family's courtyard, introducing him to everyone he met. This is Yunyang, my best brother in Tianxian continent. Everyone's gaze was strange, their expression strange, in short, it was extremely strange. Yunyang could even hear a few people shaking their heads, sighing and murmuring softly. When will this fellow recover from the backlash of his 7 emotions? It's unbelievable, our young Master Lei actually has a brother now. When he gets rid of the backlash of his cultivation method, I wonder how his brother will die. Beaten to death, tortured to death, or toyed with to death. No matter what, he's destined to die a horrible death. Yunyang sneered inwardly. How would his brother die? Perhaps the Lei family doesn't know yet, but you've already invited the greatest god of death into your home. It's better to worry about how you'll die first. However, there's one thing that's true, you're destined to die a horrible death, that's for sure. Happy face carrot, I've been thinking about what the Lei family should do today. I've thought about it so much that my head hurts. In the end, I've decided to cut the Gordian knot. Chapter 1170. That night, Lei Dongtian once again held a banquet. All the young talents of the Lei family were gathered in the hall without exception. Even the elders of the previous generation were present. For elders of the previous generation were also present at the banquet, drinking a few cups of wine and exchanging a few pleasantries with Yunyang. Obviously, this was all for the sake of Lei Dongtian. Lei Dongtian, at least at the current stage of the Lei family, still had considerable prestige. However, was this prestige because of himself, because of his old patriarch, or because of something else? Lei Dongtian sat at the head of the table, looking around proudly, looking down on others as if they were nothing. He pointed at them and introduced them to Yunyang, asking who this was and who that was. It felt like he had power in his hands. Looking at the situation, Yunyang suddenly came to a realization. Lei Dongtian's old patriarch's power in the Lei family had reached its peak, so much so that even he, the young master, had risen. This could be seen from the fact that many people disregarded their status to curry favor with the patriarch's son. Among these people, many of their positions and seniority were higher than Lei Dongtian's, or even much higher. However, it also reflected from another aspect that the entire Lei family had completely decayed. There was no longer the aura of a sect that had once almost touched the celestial luck banner. After getting drunk and eating to their heart's content, it was already midnight. Yunyang quietly floated out of the room according to the information he had gathered and drifted to the Lei family's ancestral hall in the backyard. Along the way, Yunyang, who was unimpeded, felt a little lost. With Yunyang's current cultivation base, it would not be difficult for him to destroy the Lei family. Even if the Lei family had gained the favor of the Sacred Heart Palace's elder, Yunyang would not take it to heart. Instead, Yunyang was worried about how he could help his sixth brother vent his anger. To end this deep-rooted hatred. So what if he offended this great elder to avenge his brother? Yunyang would not hesitate. However, what Yunyang was confused about was how to do it. The Lei family is already rotten. They have long stopped caring about the contributions you and your family have made. They have long forgotten the glory of the past. Now, for the sake of their lives, benefits, and status, they can give up everything, be it dignity or anything else. Hoping for them to seek justice for you and your father is just a fool's dream. At this moment, in this place, standing in this family, I can't see any persistence of a warrior. I can't see any of the strength and ambition of a cultivator. This place is filthy. Everywhere is filthy. Does such a Lei clan still exist? Is there a need to purge and reform it? Yunyang kept mumbling to himself in his heart, feeling sorry for his sixth brother, sorry for his sixth brother's parents, sorry for everyone in his sixth brother's lineage. With such a Lei family, what harm would there be in dying? The Lei family yard's rows of houses flitted past under his feet. Even if Yunyang did not cast the wind cloud manifestation, no one would be able to discover Yunyang's current whereabouts. Not even a trace of him could be detected. This was the embodiment of the absolute difference in their abilities. Yunyang could hear the conversations of the people in the house below him. That Yunyang. I heard that he's Lei Dongtian's friend, and they're as close as brothers. Ha ha ha, I'm dying of laughter. This is enough to make me laugh for a year. How can a year be enough? At least until that Yunyang dies, right? How do you think Yunyang will die in the end? Who can guess the exact way he will die? That Lei Dongtian's methods of toying with his targets are getting more and more insane. Thinking about the last victim, it's truly shocking. Right, what was the last time Lei Dongtian suffered a backlash? Was it anger? But that time was short. It was only slightly more than a month before the woman was tortured to death. Then guess, how long does Lei Dongtian need to get rid of the backlash this time? Not necessarily. Maybe it'll be very fast, a few days, or maybe it'll be very slow. But one thing is for sure, this Yunyang probably can't leave, not necessarily. They're treating each other with sincerity now. When Lei Dongtian acts stupidly, he can really be righteous during this period of time. The key point now is no longer Lei Dongtian, but the family leader. He definitely won't let Yunyang leave. This person is here. If Lei Dongtian kills him, it'll mean that the backlash of the seven emotions praxis has been completely eliminated. If he were to leave, how can there be any reference? You're right. Without any reference, if Lei Dongtian were to push the cultivation method forward, it'd be too easy for him to go berserk. That's right, not to mention that the child knows too many secrets that he shouldn't know. Looking at how Lei Dongtian treats him now, he'll reveal everything to him. It'd be considered a light punishment if he didn't tell him anything, so. Yunyang, who was in the air, was dumbfounded as he listened. He froze for a moment. It was only because Yunyang's current cultivation base was rather impressive, at least much higher than the upper limit of the Lei family's combat power. Otherwise, he would have been discovered long ago. The entire Lei residence was discussing when Lei Dongtian would kill his people. How could there be so many of them, and how could they be so unscrupulous? This kind of feeling, it really seemed to be very strange, another place that Yun Yang's attention was focused on was probably the residence of the family leader of the lay residence. A deep voice was speaking. "We can't let him escape. Watch him. How can someone who knows too many secrets that he shouldn't know live long? Also, gather information about this person. This child isn't born in the bound of universe, he's someone who ascended from the lower realm. If he doesn't have a corresponding skill, how can he ascend in such a short period of cultivation? I have a feeling that this person isn't a good person, especially when he said that he's a friend of the dead Lei Mufeng. Humph. Why is he here? It's worth thinking about. Also, is Lei Mufeng really dead? He can't be dead just because he says he's dead. Is there anything unusual in the dungeon? I've already ordered for the dungeon to be doubly vigilant. Nothing must go wrong there. If there's anything unusual, kill them directly. They must not be allowed to come out alive. I want there to be no hidden dangers. Yes, I'm still a little worried. Let's go to the dungeon to take a look." To be fair, their voices were very soft. If one was not nearby, one might not be able to hear them even if they were to listen attentively. However, Yun Yang's cultivation base was so profound that even if they were to speak softly or speak through telepathy, they would not be able to escape his detection. Thus, the conversation between the two of them could be heard clearly without a single detail missing. Dungeon? Yun Yang's eyes shone the moment he heard the two keywords. He had been troubled by the lack of a breakthrough and did not know what to do at the moment. The dungeon was exactly what the other party was concerned about. Furthermore, if the person imprisoned in the dungeon was Sixth Brother's family, it would be a wonderful thing for him to rescue them. Without another word, he turned and left. The sinister dungeon was dark and damp, with snakes, insects, and rats slithering about. It was a spine-chilling sight to behold. A few of the dungeon cells were empty. Half of the guards were gathered at the entrance on the surface while the other half were gathered at the innermost part of the dungeon. The security was tight. However, Yun Yang paid no attention to these guards. He turned into a gust of wind and went straight for the deepest part of the dungeon, especially the few damp and dark cells. Yun Yang came to the end of the dungeon and focused his gaze. The moment he saw it, he could not help but admire this lay family leader's viciousness. Perhaps this fellow was not talented or bold, but when it came to ruthlessness and viciousness, it was infuriating and awe-inspiring. The prisoners in the cells were all on the verge of death. Each of their necks was hung by a chain, and their toes were barely touching the ground. Their shoulder blades had been pierced through, and they were dangling from the left and right sides of their bodies. Even though their shoulders had regained their freedom, they could only use 20% of their normal strength for a short period of time. There was also a thin chain around their waists that pierced through their flesh and wound around their lumbar vertebrae. Not only that, there was a thin chain attached to the top of their skulls, which actually pierced through their skulls and wound around their lumbar vertebrae. Not only that, there was a thin chain attached to the top of their skulls, which actually pierced through their skulls and wound a circle around their lumbar vertebrae. Not only that, there was a thin chain attached to the top of their skulls. Run? Run. If you struggle, your skull will fall. If you run, your lumbar vertebrae will break. If you run, your cervical vertebrae will break. What was most infuriating was that the torturer did not lock these people's mystical chi cultivation base. Instead, he allowed these people to breathe and recover on their own. However, no matter how they recuperated and recovered, there were so many shackles on their bodies that they could never break free no matter how high their cultivation base was. If these imprisoned people wanted to live, they could only cultivate and breathe as hard as they could to recover their physical bodies as much as possible. Do you think this is the end? Extreme agony? Obviously not. He had allowed these people to circulate their profound energy and recover their physical bodies. His goal was undoubtedly to let these people live, but more importantly, to let these people live in an even more painful way. Because in the prison cell, there were several white and plump insects. Each of them was fat and big, and looked very clumsy. They did not seem to have much lethality. However, Yunyang knew about these worms. Spirit-absorbing worms. These worms were known as the mortal enemy and nemesis of all cultivators in this world. There was only one reason for this: these worms could absorb a cultivator's mystical chi and cause the cultivator's cultivation base to suffer permanent damage that was extremely difficult to recover from. Currently, the few spirit-absorbing worms would crawl to the dantian of these prisoners every once in a while and absorb the mystical chi that the target had painstakingly gathered during this period of time. Even though the absorption capacity of the spirit-absorbing worms was relatively limited and could not absorb all of the prisoners' mystical chi, it was enough to make the prisoners even more stressed and difficult to deal with. Naturally, there would be exhalation when there was absorption. Lay family leader had his own deeper purpose in using the spirit-absorbing worms. After the spirit-absorbing worms had absorbed a sufficient amount of mystical chi, they would excrete a special mystical crystal. This mystical crystal was unique in that it could be absorbed directly and quickly turned into abundant mystical chi that would fill one's meridians and become part of one's own cultivation base. It was more convenient than any spiritual jade. One had to absorb the spiritual chi of the spiritual jade first before cultivating to digest it before turning it into one's own mystical chi. There was a huge difference in the middle. However, the mystical crystal produced by the spirit-absorbing worms was not depleted at all, probably because it was the mystical chi that had been cultivated. In other words, the spirit-absorbing worms were the medium of cultivation base transfer. However, using such a method to absorb mystical chi to benefit oneself at the expense of others was not something that any cultivator would be happy to see. It was infuriating and intolerable. What was more, this lay family leader was absorbing the mystical chi of his blood brothers and family members. He was simply insane, worse than a pig or a dog. The rage in Yunyang's eyes was unprecedentedly intense. I'm really innocent. I'm not with Lei Junping. A man who was hung up mumbled in an extremely weak voice, "Let me go. I beg you, let me go, I'm really not with Lei Junping. I'm just a martial artist, an ordinary martial artist. I met Lei Junping by chance that day and I've only seen him once in my entire life," the person was murmuring to himself. The person did not even dare to raise his voice. Once he did, the slightest tremor would cause the torture instruments on his body to work together. He would then be in pain and his meridians would suffer an excruciating pain that felt like his bones were being crushed. Yet, he was still pleading incessantly. After a while, when he could not take it anymore, he would cultivate his cultivation method. Once he regained some strength, he would begin pleading again, and the cycle would repeat itself. The guards around him ignored him coldly, turning a deaf ear to him and a blind eye. Yunyang took a closer look. There were a total of 3 such cells, placed side by side in the innermost area. Each cell had 2 people, and the cells were connected. There were only 2 bars separating them, but the gap between the bars was wide enough for a cow to walk through. Such an arrangement was obviously meant for the people in the other cells to clearly see the miserable state of the people in this cell. Of course, the people on the other side could see it as well. What the other party was going through was what he had already gone through, was about to go through, or had been going through. It was undoubtedly a double torture of the mind and body. The person who could come up with such a torturous idea must be the most outstanding genius among the inhumane crowd. Yunyang gritted his teeth. He was completely able to discern that no matter which one of the 6 people in this prison cell, all of them had long since exceeded the limits of what their bodies could endure, and once they let out their last breath, they would instantly pass away and go to the netherworld. The only thing that kept them alive, the last thing that kept them alive was this cruel torture. In order to endure this torture, they could only wholeheartedly cultivate and extend their lifespan bit by bit, continuing this state of struggling at death's door. In spite of this, the truth was that each of them no longer had the possibility of survival. There was not an ounce of muscle left on these people's bodies, only a layer of pale, wrinkled skin. It was like a textbook example of skin wrapped around bones. Many of the bones that were exposed were grayish-white in color. It was a color that would only appear when the bones had decayed to a certain extent. Perhaps, it should be said that if the chains that tied them up and hung them suddenly disappeared, at least 70% of their bones would have turned into powder the moment they fell to the ground. Upon confirming the situation, Yunyang felt chills all over his body, a chill rising from his tailbone. This was such a cruel and vicious method. They had tortured these people to this point and yet they were still alive. As the saying went, one could neither live nor die. This was probably the most they could do. Among the many prisoners, there was a burly man who looked like a burly man. However, at this moment, he looked even more miserable than the others. His entire body was only a piece of wrinkled skin that wrapped around his skeleton-like body. His head was drooping, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. In the entire prison, he was the only one who did not speak a word. It was not only because of his original intention, but also because he was in a coma due to his heavy injuries. Just as Yunyang was about to step forward to investigate and see if there was anyone who could be saved, he heard a swoosh of air coming from outside. Then, a stern voice said, "Any abnormalities?" "Reporting to Master, there are no abnormalities." "All right, the few of you wait outside." Chapter 1171. Yunyang remained patient and did not move. Then, a flurry of hurried footsteps could be heard. The first to appear at the entrance was a middle-aged man with a square face, big ears, and a stern expression. The man's gaze was cold and sinister. His gait and mannerisms exuded a domineering aura, yet it could not conceal the eerie aura that flowed throughout him. It was incongruous. Behind him were two middle-aged men and two youths. One of them was Lei Dongtian. The man in the lead strode to the innermost area and held onto the fence as he looked in. A faint smile hung at the corners of his lips as he spoke slowly. "Third great uncle, I'm here to see you. How have you been all this while?" The elder, who had been silent with his head drooped, slowly lifted his head. His lifeless eyes focused for a while before he finally saw the face in front of him clearly. His gaze was dazed for a moment before he recognized the man. He actually coughed and laughed out loud. "It's Junming. I've been well, I've been well. I've been waiting for you to come. I wanted to see you again. Third great uncle, you've been spending your remaining years here and you've actually missed me so much. How thoughtful of you." Lei family head Lei Junming smiled warmly. "Third great uncle, you've been worried about me indeed. Come to think of it, we've always had the best relationship in the family." This third great uncle chuckled, his gaze strange. "Junming, I've never been able to let you go, but it's not because we're close. Then why?" Lei Junming asked with a faint smile, seemingly interested. Third great uncle chuckled, his voice weak but filled with indescribable delight. "Back then, this old man was in a drunken stupor, and after a ridiculous act. I had an affair with your mother and gave birth to you. Although you didn't suffer any disabilities or defects, this old man always felt that I'd treated you unfairly. Watching you grow up step by step until the day you ascended to the position of Lei family head, this old man was extremely comforted. Although you're a bastard, you've inherited the Lei family's throne after all. Even if this old man dies, when I meet your father in the afterlife, I can still brag to him. After all, he's been wearing the muddle-headed hat his entire life." He chuckled and said, "Junming, no one in the Lei family knows that you're actually a bastard." Before he could finish speaking, Lei Junming had already grabbed the old man's neck. His eyes were ice-cold. "Old bastard, you're courting death." The third great uncle was strangled by the neck, but he still tried his best to laugh. "If I hadn't pitied your mother and helped your father plant seeds, she wouldn't have been able to raise you. Ha ha ha. I made a wrong decision back then and gave birth to a bastard like you. It's really karma. If I knew this, I wouldn't have acted so recklessly. Even if I let you live, I should have strangled you to death. Cough, cough, cough. At the same time, the 4 people who were being tortured also opened their mouths and laughed with all their might. Although their voices were extremely weak, the ridicule that came from the bottom of their hearts was incomparably clear. Of course, it was fake. However, these people had no other means of revenge. The only way to disgust Lei Junming was to fabricate such a vicious story. The 3rd great-uncle didn't care that Lei Junming was strangling his neck. He forced himself to speak. Even if he only had 1 breath left, he still had to laugh out loud. Lei Junming angrily strangled his neck, killing intent flashing in his eyes. Suddenly, he chuckled and relaxed his grip. He said lightly, "Third great-uncle, for so many years, you've always wanted to provoke me into killing you. But I never did it because you're still of use. But, today is different." The 3rd great-uncle panted heavily for a long time before he could catch his breath. He asked in surprise, "Why?" "Today, I came specially to tell you a piece of good news. There's news of Lei Mufeng, that bastard, that bastard." Lei Junming laughed coldly. A murky light flashed in the 3rd great-uncle's eyes. "Oh? You don't have to pretend that you don't care. I know you care. If it wasn't for your interference, that little bastard would have died long ago." Lei Junming said lightly, "I already know that he left the family and went to the Tianxian continent. No wonder we couldn't find him." The 3rd great-uncle chuckled. Good ability. Even with the entire family's power, he was still able to escape. Good ability, ha ha ha. As expected of the patriarch's son. Like father like son. Lei Junming's eyes were cold as he said indifferently, "Yes, he is indeed not bad. However, it is a pity that, this genius of the Lei clan, the successor that 3rd great-uncle has been looking forward to, although he did not die in my hands, he has now become a pile of bones." The 3rd great-uncle was stunned. He suddenly struggled and roared, "Nonsense, that's impossible." Lei Junming took a step back and looked at the 3rd great-uncle's agitated expression happily. He said with a face full of smiles, "3rd great-uncle, you don't believe me? I can swear to the heavens that this matter is absolutely true." The 3rd great-uncle roared angrily, "He won't die. Lei Junming, you bastard, you beast." He used up all the vicious words he could think of and cursed continuously. 3rd great-uncle. Actually, this is really the last time I'm coming to see you. Lei Junming said gently. He took out a cup of spiritual liquid, pinched the 3rd great-uncle's chin, and forced it down his throat. As he drank, he said gently, "3rd great-uncle, I'm trying to raise your spirits and extend your life, lest you die just like this. No matter what, I want to take care of you until you're old and dead." The 3rd great-uncle coughed non-stop and could not catch his breath. He glared at him angrily but could not speak for a while. "3rd great-uncle, Lei Mufeng is already dead, and Lei Junping has been dead for many years." Lei Junming's eyes shone like a venomous snake. He said word by word, "I'll ask you one last time. Where is the Lei family's thunder seal?" 3rd great-uncle panted as he looked at Lei Junming maliciously. Suddenly, he cackled and said mockingly, "Do you think this old man will tell you? I do know where it is, but I'm not telling you. You've tortured me for more than 10 years, but have I told you? I'm at the end of my rope now, and I have no more thoughts. Lei Junming, why don't you guess if I'll tell you?" Lei Junming smiled gently and said, "3rd great-uncle, you've forgotten. It's best if you're willing to tell me today. If you're really unwilling, it doesn't matter. You probably don't know yet, but the Lei family has returned to its roots. Guess who our elder ancestor is?" The 3rd great-uncle's murky eyes widened. "Who is it?" You know about the Sacred Heart Palace, right? Lei Junming said proudly, the first elder of the Sacred Heart Palace is called Lei Qianli. He's a big shot above the clouds. The third great-uncle and the other prisoners were stunned. They stammered, could it be? That's our elder ancestor. Lei Junming took out a genealogy book. Third great-uncle, take a look. I didn't make this up. The third great-uncle trembled all over, and suddenly, tears streamed down his face. The heavens are blind. They've returned to their roots when you're in power, a beast like you. With such a powerful help, do you understand now? It's no longer important to me whether I get the Thunder Seal or not. It's just icing on the cake. Even without that Thunder Seal, I have the cultivation technique passed down by my elder ancestor. The Lei family's overall strength is advancing at a tremendous pace now, and it won't be long before we return to our peak. By the next Celestial Luck Banner battle at the latest, we'll definitely be able to reach the top and achieve the glory that even Lei Junping failed to achieve back then. It'll be realized in my hands, Lei Junming's. Lei Junming said faintly, I know you don't like me, look down on me, and even hate me. You think I'm scum, worse than pigs and dogs, devoid of conscience. I know all that. But we're still Lei family members, and we share the same bloodline. Those you're looking forward to are all dead. If you don't pass the Thunder Seal to me, it'll just be gone forever. It won't affect me at all, and the only thing that'll be affected is the loss of our exclusive heritage. Are you willing to accept such an outcome? On the other hand, if you pass the Thunder Seal to me, even if I'm bad and unworthy, my surname is still Lei. Who knows, one day, there might be someone who fulfills your wish to be the next patriarch. Lei Junming smiled. So, please think about it again and give me an answer. This is my last chance, and I won't force it. Third uncle panted and gritted his teeth. Suddenly, he broke two of his teeth with a loud thud, and turbid blood flowed down the corner of his mouth. He said miserably, even if I'm buried in the ground, rotting forever, I'll never tell you where the Thunder Seal is. You should give up on that idea. The old man struggled fiercely, blood splattering all over his body. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Ha ha ha, Lei Junming chuckled. Old thing. You don't think I care about that, he snorted and waved his hand. It's fine if there's no movement. But if there is, I'll kill them first. With that, he turned around and left. However, at this moment, a gloomy voice suddenly rang out. You want to leave just like that? Heaven is watching what you do. You've done too many bad things, and karma will come. Lei Junming, your retribution is here. Before he finished speaking, a tall and handsome figure suddenly appeared in this gloomy prison cell. The newcomer was tall and handsome. At a glance, he looked similar to Lei Junming, and even more similar to Lei Dongtian. Lei Junming took a step back, frowned, and asked in surprise, "Who are you?" The figure smiled faintly. "Uncle, don't you recognize me? I'm the nephew that you said was dead, Lei Mufeng." Lei Junming squinted his eyes and said lightly, "Imposter, you're talking nonsense. Kill him, no mercy." Without any explanation, he gave the order to kill. At the same time, his body suddenly retreated, and a powerful palm strike landed on third uncle and the others in the cell. He did not care whether it was real or not, he wanted to kill third uncle and the others first. The surrounding cultivators quickly surrounded Lei Mufeng, who had suddenly appeared, and attacked him as a group. The Lei Mufeng who had suddenly appeared was, of course, Yun Yang in disguise. After much thought, Yun Yang decided to use the identity of his sixth brother, Supreme Thunder, to solve the Lei family's matter. Although he had never seen Supreme Thunder's true face, everyone who knew about Lei Mufeng's true appearance would only know him as his sixth brother when he was young. Yun Yang's current appearance, with a slight alteration of Lei Junming in his son's appearance, was more than enough. After all, they were blood relatives. There must be some similarities in their appearances, enough to fool others. I, Lei Mufeng, am back. Today, blood shall be paid with blood. Yunyang roared towards the sky. Sixth brother, today, this young brother will avenge you and vent your anger. Suddenly, a boundless murderous aura descended upon them. The entire dungeon instantly made everyone feel as though there was no daylight. Looking at the 5 to 6 practitioners who were charging at him from all directions, Yunyang snorted coldly, his gaze turning colder. With a wave of his hand, a saber light appeared in his hand and circled the area like a bolt of lightning. All the practitioners who charged at him were sliced into halves without exception. The dungeon was filled with the stench of blood and the glow of blood was everywhere. Almost at the same time, another ray of saber light flew over and forcefully broke through Lei Junming's powerful palm strike, and directly chopped off his right hand. Lei Junming screamed miserably and staggered back with a pale face. It took him a lot of effort to stabilize his body. Just as he steadied himself, the saber light continued to flicker. The 4 people who came with Lei Junming were all killed by the saber light. Lei Dongtian, who was the first to bear the brunt of the attack, had both his legs chopped off. He rolled around on the ground, howling in agony. The other 3 were the same. Their 8 legs were still standing on the ground, but their owners were rolling back and forth on the ground. Their voices were as shrill as pigs being slaughtered. Then, with another flash of saber light, the guards in the dungeon were decapitated. After Yunyang had dealt with all the enemies, he entered the dungeon in a flash. Saber light flickered continuously as the chains that bound the prisoners were all severed without exception. Amidst the crimson light, Yunyang was like a god of death that had suddenly descended upon the mortal realm. Chapter 1172. Just as Yunyang broke the shackles of the captive, 2 strange swooshing noises could be heard. 2 plump spirit-sucking bugs suddenly flew up, charging towards Yunyang while twisting their bodies. The spirit-sucking bugs were instinctively passionate about mystical qi and were extremely sensitive to the surrounding spiritual qi. Yunyang's entry into their territory had naturally attracted their attack. Yunyang did not have the slightest fondness for these 2 evil creatures. Without hesitation, he kicked the 2 soul-sucking bugs in midair. With 2 soft thuds, the bodies of the 2 soul-sucking bugs turned into minced meat in midair. Although the spirit-sucking bugs had the unique talent of absorbing mystical qi and spiritual power, their targets were either captives who were completely defenseless or those who were extremely weak. Yunyang, for example, would not be able to withstand even 2 light kicks and would be crushed into dust immediately. The moment the spirit-sucking bugs perished, an extremely dense mystical qi diffused. It was the essence of the spiritual crystals that the spirit-sucking bugs had accumulated in their bodies. If they had absorbed all of it, it would have been greatly beneficial. However, Yunyang had gotten rid of it with a wave of his sleeves. Such an evil energy that came from an external source was extremely disgusting to even touch, let alone absorb it into one's body. Third uncle grew weaker after the series of setbacks, but his murky eyes lit up unexpectedly as he stared at Yunyang without blinking. His crippled body was carefully released by Yunyang and placed on the ground steadily. Although he was still in a bad state, his shackles had been removed and he had regained his freedom. However, third uncle still did not blink, staring at Yunyang. Other than that, he was panting heavily, a blush creeping onto his corpse-like face. The other 5 people were also excited. Their hollow eye sockets were shining brightly. Mufeng? Third uncle looked at Yunyang, his voice trembling. You are Mufeng? Are you really Mufeng? Yunyang did not nod nor shake his head. He replied softly, Third uncle, this is not the place to talk. Let me get rid of these scum first. In reality, there were already a few guards who were lucky enough to survive that had fled for their lives. Thus, the people outside also learned that there was an enemy invasion. Battle cries suddenly erupted, and countless people rushed in. How could Yun Yang care about such a small amount of manpower? As he swung the saber in his hand, a ball of saber light exploded once again, filling the entire passageway like a roller. For a moment, the saber light was as dazzling as a dragon, pushing outwards. Those who stood in its way were annihilated. Wherever the saber light passed, not only were the few guards who were trying to escape cut into pieces of flesh and blood before they could even let out a scream, but as the saber light continued, a series of cries of alarm and misery rang out from afar, lingering on endlessly. After a long while of concentrated sounds, the dungeon returned to a deathly silent atmosphere. It was not that no one wanted to speak, but everyone had been killed by Yun Yang. He had killed them all. None of the people who were rushing in were spared by this saber strike. Amidst the silence, an unprecedentedly thick stench of blood assaulted the nostrils. There was only red and nothing else in sight. Although the cultivation base of the Lei family's men was not weak, compared to Yun Yang, who was now at the pinnacle of a fourth-level Saint King, they were child's play. It was as easy as flipping his hand. Seeing that the Lei family had been annihilated, Yun Yang stretched out his hand again. With a swoosh, the divine edge flew back from afar and landed in his hand. The blade was as clear as ever, untainted by even a speck of dust. Third great uncle and the others were dazzled by this miraculous and extraordinary technique, and their hearts were filled with boundless shock. The weak youth who had run away from home all those years ago had actually grown to such an extent? Even Lei Junming and the others who had lost their limbs were so shocked that they even forgot to scream. The path has been cleared. Without batting an eyelid, Yun Yang had already injected 6 streams of qi of vitality into the bodies of 6 people, including the person who had been begging for mercy. However, Yun Yang knew very well that although the qi of vitality was a top-notch item that could heal and prolong one's life, it could only slightly delay the time of death for these 6 people. It could not really bring them back to life, but Yun Yang had still done it. He believed that this last moment of life was crucial to these 6 people. Third uncle, how do you want to deal with this Lei Junming and his sons? The people on the ground were in a mess, and people were rushing over from all directions. However, Yun Yang did not care. He did not take it to heart at all. They were just ants. Even if they came, he could just kill them easily. Third uncle was still panting with difficulty, but a joyful smile hung on the corners of his lips. This old man doesn't ask for the prosperity of my family, doesn't ask to be invincible in this world. My biggest wish is to see Lei Junming beheaded in front of me. I thought that the heavens were blind and that the scourge would live for 1,000 years, but I didn't expect the heavens to fulfill my wish. The heavens have been kind to me, kind to me. This old man has dreamed of this beast dying in front of me countless times. When I opened my eyes again, there was only disappointment. I never thought that there would be a day when this beast's life would really be decided by my words. The heavens haven't let me down, the heavens haven't let me down. He guffawed. Lei Junming, oh Lei Junming, you heartless beast. Have you ever thought that you would have such a day? Amidst his laughter, a strange glint flashed across his gaze as he looked at Yun Yang. Lei Junming slumped on the ground and snorted coldly. Lei Mufeng, since you're here for revenge, what's the point of wasting words? Just do it. What's the point of having a glib tongue? Do you want to torture me for revenge? Just go ahead and make your move. See if this family head will say anything. Third uncle smirked coldly and enunciated each word clearly, Lei Junming, you're wrong. I've never planned to torture you. You're torturing our bodies because you want to obtain and know. But I know everything you want to obtain and know, but you're destined to never know the answer. You'll be a muddled ghost even if you become a ghost. I really have no intention of torturing you. I only want you, a beast that's worse than pigs and dogs, to die early and not live in this world. That's enough. Third uncle struggled, his eyes glinting with extreme viciousness. He supported himself on the ground with one hand, trying to prop up his crippled body as he panted. Give me a saber. This old man wants to send him on his way with my own hands. Yunyang took a step forward and helped his third uncle up. In actual fact, most of the third uncle's body was pressed against Yunyang's shoulder. Only his skeletal hand stretched out stubbornly. Yunyang wanted to fulfill his wish, placing the divine edge in his third uncle's hand. Third uncle tried his best to lift the saber, but he could not even lift it. He said with difficulty, Mufeng. Third uncle can't make it. You must remember, if there's an enemy in the future, don't give him a chance to stand up. Although it's cruel to eliminate the root of the problem, it's done once and for all. Remember this. In the future, if your subordinates have ulterior motives, they must be dealt with at once. Don't give him any chance to go against you. Your father wasn't ruthless enough. He fell into Lei Juanming's trap because of a bit of soft-heartedness. I've reminded him many times, but he never believed me, always thinking about the same bloodline. It's better to kill the wrong person than to let him go. Even if it's cruel, it can guarantee you a long life in this martial world. Only survival is the most important thing. Before he could finish speaking, the tip of the knife in third uncle's hand was already pressed against Lei Juanming's throat. Third uncle mustered all his remaining strength to stab downwards, but he was already at the end of his rope. Even though the knife was aimed at Lei Juanming's throat, it was like an arrow at the end of its flight. It couldn't pierce through the white silk robe and couldn't pierce through Lei Juanming's throat. Yunyang agreed in a low voice and pressed on his third uncle's hand. With a soft puff, blood splattered, and Lei Juanming's head directly rolled off. Third uncle's arm swayed, his saber falling to the ground with a clang. He chuckled bitterly. No, this old man's life is at stake, there's no turning back. However, it's enough to see Lei Juanming die in my own hands. He watched Yunyang sheath his saber, his murky gaze revealing an indescribable weariness as he said, Mu Feng, bring us out and find a few soft beds for us to lie on, we haven't laid down and rested for more than a decade. Let us rest well in the last moments of our lives. Yunyang's heart ached as he said, all right. As for these people, you can deal with them as you see fit. With your current cultivation, no one in the Lei family can stop you from doing anything. Third great uncle closed his eyes tiredly. Mu Feng, you're good. Really good. The rest of them, upon seeing Lei Juanming's death, had completely relaxed and fainted. Thankfully, the lingering air of vitality still lingered in them, allowing them to live a little longer. Yunyang thought quickly and constructed a dense qi bed with mystical qi, placing all 6 of them on it. After some thought, he made another bed and threw Lei Dongtian and the rest on it with their meridians sealed. Lei Dongtian cursed incessantly, his mouth full of obscenities. Kill me if you dare. Lei Mufeng, you cowardly tortoise bastard, I look down on you. Even if you win now, I will still look down on you. Do it, why don't you dare to do it? Yunyang was annoyed listening to them, so he sealed their voices as well, dragging the 2 invisible mystical qi beds as he walked out. Outside the dungeon, there was already a large crowd of people gathered. However, Yunyang really did not care about these people. Just like what third uncle had said, with the cultivation base that Yunyang had displayed, the entire Lei family could not stop him from doing anything. When the Lei family's reinforcements saw Yunyang coming out and recognized him as an unfamiliar face, they could not help but swarm forward, intending to tear Yunyang into pieces. It was a pity that the gap between their abilities and Yunyang's was too wide. Yunyang's eyes were filled with murderous intent as the divine edge shot out once again, turning into a sharp saber light. The saber light that was hundreds of feet long spun and danced in the air. Wherever it went, only death could be seen. In less than 100 breaths' time, the hundreds of Lei family's reinforcements were all killed by Yun Yang with a single slash. Yun Yang's merciless massacre had led to another result. The air of karma that he had not seen for a long time surged towards Yun Yang like rivers flowing into the ocean. The intensity made Yun Yang feel as if he had slaughtered an entire army. Yun Yang's massacre this time was intense, but he did not kill any experts. The highest cultivation base he had killed was only at the level of a saint, but the air of karma that he had harvested was bountiful, especially when he had assisted third uncle in killing Lei Junming. The intense air of karma almost made Yun Yang feel as if he had killed thousands of people. This result could only mean that not only was Lei Junming guilty and deserving of death, the entire Lei family was also a family of evil and deserved to die. Yun Yang continued to kill as he walked out. Along the way, the number of people who had lost their lives to Yun Yang's saber had exceeded 2,000. The air of karma that he had obtained from this round of massacre was so rich that it made Emmy in the space gasp in surprise. How long had it been? It had been so long since it had such a bountiful harvest. What was going on outside? Had its master turned into a god of slaughter? This was too much. According to Tianxian Continent's calculation, had he killed hundreds of thousands of villains in a short period of time? Yun Yang continued his massacre, killing all the way to the Lei family's main residence. His murderous intent did not diminish at all. The boundless murderous intent made the surviving members of the Lei family afraid to make a move. At this moment, every living person's face was deathly pale, and they were trembling. Yun Yang's powerful holy king deific sense enveloped the entire Lei family's residence. No one could escape. Those who had tried to escape were all killed by a flash of saber light, their heads separated from their bodies. For a moment, the entire Lei family's residence had turned into a gigantic cage. The entire Lei family was like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. No one could even think of escaping, they could only wait for the end of their lives to come. The accumulated stench of blood grew thicker, spreading dozens of miles away. The stench of blood in the Lei family's main residence was so thick that it was suffocating. Yun Yang stood proudly in the center of the Lei family's residence and ordered, "The few of you, come over here. Bring a few big beds out from the rooms." After being pointed at by him, the few of them were so frightened that their eyes rolled back and they fainted on the ground. Yun Yang snorted and swung his saber casually, killing all those who had fainted. He then pointed at a few more people. Having learned their lesson, the newly appointed people scrambled to bring a few big beds out. Yun Yang carefully carried his third granduncle and the others onto them and settled them down. The 6 of them laid on the soft beds, moaning in comfort in unison. The person who had been begging for mercy sighed comfortably and suddenly guffawed, saying, "So comfortable, so comfortable. To be able to have such a day, this life is worth it. I have no regrets even if I die." He continued to guffaw, the vibration of his laughter affecting his entire body. The bones in his calves suddenly broke from the tibia. However, he did not feel it at all, still laughing heartily. "I've begged for mercy for more than 10 years, but no one believed me. Or maybe you all are just looking down on my ambition." The person laughed, tears rolling down his cheeks. "But I really don't know Lei Junping. I just happened to pass by that day. I didn't even know that there was a Lei family here. Just like that, I was captured and imprisoned for 13 years. I was tortured and interrogated for 13 years, ha 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 ha. This world is so interesting, so interesting." 2 streaks of tears rolled down his cheeks amidst the laughter. Then, his laughter stopped, his breathing stopped, and his life ended. Third great-uncle's withered hair shook, and he used all his strength to slowly turn his head. He looked at the person who had just been laughing, but had now completely stopped. His lips squirmed, and he murmured, "I'm sorry. We're sorry, we've always looked down on you. You've always been begging for mercy. But even we didn't think that you're really innocent, that everything was an undeserved misfortune. The other four were in a similar state, all of them unconscious. Perhaps they had fallen asleep, or perhaps they had fallen asleep. Third granduncle looked at Yun Yang with an indescribable look in his eyes as he murmured, Mu Feng, come here. Yun Yang walked closer to him. Block off the people around us. I don't want anyone other than you to hear this secret. Even if you don't care, I still don't want to. Third granduncle's breath grew weaker as he spoke. All right. With a wave of Yun Yang's hand, a thick layer of mystical qi sealed off the space. Clouds and mist appeared, blocking the vision of the rest of the people present. Although it was only the first time he had met this third granduncle, Yun Yang was filled with respect for him, including the other four people. Facing such inhumane torture, he had persevered for 13 years, never yielding. What kind of perseverance was this? Just this persistence alone was enough to make anyone in this world feel deep respect for him. This was not something an ordinary person could do. Yun Yang asked himself if he had been in his shoes, he might not have been able to persevere and endure it. Perhaps, he would have committed suicide the moment he knew that it was impossible, saving himself from the piecemeal torture and hopeless wait. I know that you're not Mu Feng. Third granduncle looked at Yun Yang. Despite his words, his gaze was warm. Chapter 1173. Yun Yang was silent for a moment. Why do you think so? Mu Feng never calls me third granduncle. He only calls me third grandfather. A bitter smile hung on third granduncle's face. As for the other four, you obviously don't know any of them. If it were Mu Feng, he'd only act more intimately. Although your kindness and sincerity towards us are genuine, you still feel like your family. His lifeless eyes looked at Yun Yang. We can feel your kindness, but we can also feel the distance between us. Don't you think so? Yun Yang could not help chuckling helplessly. His deliberate disguise was only to deceive Lei Junming and the others, to give them the feeling that a blood debt must be paid with blood. He did not expect to deceive third great-uncle and the others. The reason why he did not take the initiative to tell them was because he was afraid that it would agitate them and hasten their deaths. No matter how well he disguised himself, he would never be able to deceive his loved ones. This had always been a maxim in the martial world. I believe there's no such thing as kindness without a reason. Even if you're not Mu Feng, you must be related to him. Then, what about Mu Feng? Who are you? Third granduncle looked at Yun Yang with hopeful eyes. Yun Yang's gaze dimmed. I'm Lei Mufeng's sworn brother. He's the sixth among us brothers, and I'm the ninth. Looking at the old man's hopeful gaze, Yun Yang's lips quivered before he finally said, Sixth brother, has passed away for many years. The joy in third granduncle's eyes was extinguished like the last embers of his flame. Passed away for many years. These words were like the straw that broke the camel's back. His entire body trembled. He wanted to say something but no words came out. He could only sigh and close his eyes. At that moment, he felt hopeless. Yun Yang sighed as well. He did not want to say it, but he had to. After all, he was not sixth brother. Yun Yang would not think it was too much if he were to take over this identity and obtain all the Lei family's resources. In fact, with his current wealth, he did not care much for the Lei family's belongings. However, in the eyes of third granduncle and the others, they would always fall into the hands of outsiders. Therefore, he had to make this clear. Third granduncle, what do you all want to do with the remaining Lei family members? Yun Yang asked softly. This sentence conveyed a message, I'm just here to help. The Lei family's matters are still up to you. I won't interfere. Yun Yang was not thinking too much about it. Instead, he was trying to eliminate any unpleasantness from the smallest details. This was the first time Yun Yang had racked his brain to consider the feelings of those who were much weaker than him. I care about your feelings, I care about all your decisions, because you are my sixth brother's family. I want to kill everything for my sixth brother, but I'm not his blood relative. I don't represent everything. Yun Yang could clearly sense that the qi of vitality he had injected earlier was rapidly dispersing. The foundation of these people's cultivation method had long collapsed. Once the last bit of qi of vitality was exhausted, they would be completely helpless to turn the situation around. In other words, if he didn't clear up his funeral arrangements during this period of time, he really wouldn't have a chance. Especially when their minds were completely relaxed, their bodies would only deteriorate at an even faster rate. Third granduncle closed his eyes and murmured, "The Thunder Seal is in the ancestral hall, under the ancestor's stone tablet. As for the remaining lay family members." Third granduncle's soft voice was almost inaudible, "Kill them all. I only feel disgusted when I see the lay family like this. Such a bloodline shouldn't exist." He closed his eyes and murmured, "Thank you. You are Mufeng, my best brother." This old man believes. Yun Yang suddenly felt a surge of relief. So, I can completely represent Lei Mufeng now. Yun Yang said sincerely, "I believe that Lei Mufeng will not object to any of my decisions." Third granduncle smiled in relief, "This old man believes you." He rolled his eyes, as if using the last of his strength to murmur, "Mufeng, exterminate the Lei family. Exterminate them, don't leave them in this world." His murky eyes looked at Yun Yang. Suddenly, his gaze became extraordinarily clear and sharp. He straightened his back and shouted, "A filthy family is not worthy of the surname Lei." His voice was loud, shaking the air. Then, it stopped abruptly. Third granduncle's last words were still echoing in the air, but all signs of life had ceased. His soul had left the underworld, and he had passed away. The other four people were lying on the soft bed. They had stopped breathing even before third granduncle. They had gone to the netherworld with a smile amidst the rest that they had longed for the most. However, Yun Yang could see that the four of them were still listening with their eyes wide open when third granduncle uttered his last words. It was only when they heard third granduncle's last words that they finally closed their eyes in peace. "A filthy family is not worthy of the surname Lei. Is this what you all want to see? But all of you have given me a huge problem." Yun Yang stood up, his expression solemn. Kill them all? Could he? Yun Yang did not think that he was a ruthless person, but he was still hesitant in the face of such a request. He would not show mercy to those who could fight him, but how could he deal with those who had no combat ability at all? Scanning the few Lei family members who had survived, there was no one among them whose cultivation base had reached the level of supreme acme. All of them were trembling, and their faces were deathly pale, almost devoid of any color. Yun Yang heaved a sigh. With a casual slap, 3 of the 4 people that Lei Junming had brought into the secret chamber were smashed into minced meat, leaving only Lei Dongtian. When Lei Dongtian woke up and realized that he was lying on the bed, he moved subconsciously to confirm that his legs were indeed gone. Everything that had happened before was not a nightmare, but reality. For a moment, it felt like a dream. It took him a long time before his eyes regained clarity. What is going on? Who are you? Who are you? Lei Dongtian roared. A purple robe appeared before his eyes. It was Yun Yang. Brother Lei, you're awake? The voice was cold. Brother Yun, did you save me? Lei Dongtian's ferocious expression disappeared, his eyes filled with gratitude and kindness. Yun Yang was stunned for a moment, then he carefully checked his mental energy and finally confirmed that this fellow did not suspect him at all. He seemed to be the only outsider in this realm, why did he not suspect him at all? Yun Yang expressed extreme incomprehension towards Lei Dongtian's mentality. Could it be that the backlash of the 7 emotions was so domineering? Yes, it's a pity that I was a step too late. I couldn't save the others in time. Yunyang criticized in his heart, but his face was sorrowful as he sighed. Lei Dongtian's face was full of gratitude. He sighed and said, I already knew that you were the only one who could save people from Lei Mufeng's hands. In the entire Lei family, only you and Lei Mufeng could speak. It was the same when facing the pressure of the 4 Seasons Towers for Supremes, and it's the same with Lei Mufeng today. Brother Yun has saved my life again and again. You're my great benefactor, my savior. I'm ashamed. Yunyang sighed, I've only saved Brother Lei alone. The Lei family can't be considered to have survived. Lei Dongtian's bloodless face showed a hint of viciousness. How are the others? Other than the women and children, all the cultivators and martial artists of the Lei family in their prime are gone. Yunyang sighed compassionately, there are mountains of corpses and seas of blood, broken limbs and wreckage. I wanted to save a few more people, but no matter how I begged, Brother Lei only promised to spare your life. He wouldn't spare another person, Yunyang said sadly. Lei Dongtian gritted his teeth, where's Lei Mufeng? He's gone. Yunyang said, he seemed to have gone to find a doctor to save those who were dying. I could see that he was very familiar with them and was very concerned about them. Lei Dongtian stretched out his hand and caressed his broken leg. The muscles on his face twitched as the intense pain struck him, giving him a hysterical impulse. Brother Lei, is there any way to treat your leg? Yunyang was worried and said, if we don't find a way to treat it soon, I might become disabled forever. Lei Dongtian said with a ferocious expression, don't worry, Brother Yun. I have a way to deal with this injury. I still need your help in this matter. Yunyang said, as long as there is a way, as long as there is a way. Just say it. I will do my best to do it for you. Lei Dongtian panted and said, perhaps it's fated. My way of dealing with it is related to the first crisis of my life. Yunyang thought of something and asked in surprise, Brother Lei, are you talking about the battle with the 4 Seasons Tower that day? Lei Dongtian nodded and said, yes, Brother Lei is wise indeed. You understand it immediately. The surprise on Yunyang's face did not diminish at all as he said, however, with Brother Lei's current cultivation base and level, what else in the 4 Seasons Tower can catch Brother Lei's eye and be of use? Lei Dongtian endured the pain and chuckled, Brother Yun, do you still remember that I've mentioned God's bones to you back then? Yunyang was suddenly enlightened and said, how can I not remember? Brother Lei said that the 4 Seasons Towers for venerable lords possess the God's bones, that's why they have superhuman abilities. Lei Dongtian panted and said, that's right, it's the God's bones. The way of dealing with it is the God's bones. He grabbed Yunyang's hand and said, Brother Yun, you must help me. Only you can help me now. Only the God's bones can help me stand up again. Yunyang nodded and said, don't worry, don't worry. I will help you with this. When your injuries are slightly healed and your life is no longer in danger, I will carry you out to look for the God's bones. Even if it's 1,000 mountains and 10,000 rivers, I must find it. Lei Dongtian was touched and said, thank you, brother, but there's no need to be so troublesome. My current injuries are suitable for the implantation of the God's bones. He smiled sinisterly. I believe that Lei Mufeng would never have dreamed that during the period when my father was in power, our Lei family had grasped the location of the entrance to the God's graveyard. As long as I obtain the God's bone to reattach my broken limbs, not only will I be able to immediately regain my ability to walk, but I will also be able to use the God's bone to strengthen my bones. Huh? Is there such a solution? Of course, I can help Brother Lei get the God's bones, but Brother Lei has mentioned before that both the 7 emotions praxis and the implantation of the God's bones are unorthodox methods that rely on external forces. Brother Lei, do you really want to do this? Yunyang said with a considerate expression, will it affect your future cultivation base advancement? Lei Dongtian looked comforted and said in a low voice, the present cannot be compared to the past. Although the cultivation method passed down by the old ancestor is marvelous, it can't mend a broken limb. Besides, I urgently need to improve my ability now. Although the god's bones is not the right way, it is the method that suits my current condition the best. Lei Dongtian reminded him sincerely and told him to take care. Don't worry, I've remembered it all. Yunyang's eyes flashed. At this moment, Lei Dongtian's face grew paler and paler. He had lost too much blood after all. After both his legs were broken, the bleeding did not stop for more than an hour. He had also forced himself to tell Yunyang about the secret of the god's grave. Now, he was really on his last breath. After saying this with great difficulty, he could no longer support himself and murmured, my medicine is, speaking of this, his spirit suddenly went into a trance. His eyes turned black and a black mist emerged from his eyes. Then, when he looked at Yunyang's gaze again, a strange feeling arose. It was a kind of realization, with a hint of mockery and some other meaning. However, he was really out of breath and could no longer support himself. With a tilt of his head, he fainted. Yunyang was very sensitive. Lei Dongtian's strange gaze at the end made him feel a sense of alarm. What did this gaze mean? When he was exhorting Yunyang earlier, he could still feel that the backlash from the 7 emotions praxis had not ended. He was still sincere. However, why did such a gaze suddenly appear at the end? What did it mean? What impact did it have? In the back mountain of the Lei family, Yunyang had successfully opened the god's grave that the Lei family had hidden for a long time according to the method described by Lei Dongtian. Yunyang had put on a great show of acting to portray brotherly love, but his real intention was not really for Lei Dongtian. His real intention was to end a karmic relationship, one that had started in the Tianxian continent and continued to this day. He hoped that today's trip would extend the life of the Tianxian continent and not end in 100 years. A passage suddenly appeared. Yunyang held a bag in his hand, filled with the god's bones that the Lei family had retrieved from the grave all these years. Perhaps it was fated, but the Lei family had changed their cultivation method after acknowledging their ancestral roots. They no longer cared about the added power of the god's bones and had taken out all the god's bones that they had obtained in the past and placed them together. To Yunyang, this situation had saved him a lot of trouble. What made Yunyang's trip to the god's grave different from the last time was, just as Yunyang entered, he heard a voice drifting over, young man, we meet again. Yunyang smiled and said, the vastness of the bound of universe and the depth of the cultivation level are far beyond my expectations. The preparation time is much longer than expected. It's been a long time. I'm glad that the seniors don't blame me. Of course, he could tell that this voice was exactly the same as the one he had heard the last time he entered. It was obviously coming from the same person. As expected, a faint silhouette appeared in midair following the voice. What was even more different from the last time was that it was not just one silhouette that appeared this time. After the silhouette appeared, countless blurry silhouettes appeared. Thank you, benefactor. The countless remnant souls in the air bowed at the same time. Yunyang dared not be negligent. He put down the god's bones and returned the greeting solemnly. Yunyang's search for the remains of the seniors was merely a matter of convenience. I don't deserve such a heavy gift from the seniors. I don't dare to accept it. This is the gratitude you deserve. The elder silhouette in the air shook his head lightly. For so many years, the savior we've yearned for is only you. This gratitude is the only gift we can give you in return. Perhaps the humans now don't know how to treasure it, but we must. The elder silhouette was filled with sorrow. When humans know how to treasure such people and such sentiments, perhaps everything will be too late. Too late. Yun Yang was silent for a moment before he said, "There are many people like this in this world. It's just that I'm the only one you've met, seniors. It's just fate." The elder chuckled. "Perhaps." Without further ado, Yun Yang took out the god's bones from his bag and placed them on the ground one by one. Instantly, the god's bones glowed brilliantly. It was unknown if it was because they had returned to their original bodies and where they had come from. "Thank you, young man. These are probably the only god's bones that were scattered from this area. There's nothing left out." The elder glanced at them but did not move. A breeze blew and the god's bones floated in the air, quietly scattering in all directions. Many of the graves that had been excavated closed immediately after the god's bones were returned to them, glowing faintly. After a while, the god's bones returned and the tomb closed up again. A few silhouettes gradually appeared in the air. They were illusory figures, but their gazes were filled with gratitude when they looked at Yun Yang, as if they were real. "I plan to destroy this passage immediately when I go out this time." This was to prevent future generations from accidentally disturbing the tranquility of the seniors. "I wonder if the seniors have any way to teach me?" Yun Yang asked respectfully. The elder said softly, "Just follow what you did last time. Use the divine weapon to cut the space apart. It's fine as long as the space cracks appear." "Very well, this junior understands. The seniors have mentioned that there are a few other exits like this in the bound of universe. I wonder how many there are and where they are located?" Yun Yang asked. "There are 3 more. The elder answered quickly. "However, due to some kind of restriction, I can't tell you, where are the 3 exits. I'll have to trouble you to find them yourself." "It's alright, it's alright. This junior will do his best to undo the senior's shackles as soon as possible," Yun Yang replied. After a pause, Yun Yang cupped his fists and said, "Today's trip has been successful. This junior shall not delay any further. I shall take my leave now." The elder looked at him warmly and said, "The time limit for entering and exiting the passage is ineffective against you. Since you're here, why not stay a little longer?" Yun Yang replied, "This junior has just come to the bound of universe. Although my ability has improved, at the same time, I've realized that my cultivation base is still too low. The bound of universe is filled with experts and dangers. I must seize the time to improve myself so that I can deal with everything in the future." The elder nodded slowly. "That's true. Your cultivation base can be considered strong among humans, but it's only applicable to ordinary people. There are too many people in this world who can threaten your life and safety." He said rather sheepishly, "It's a pity that we can't give you any help." Yun Yang laughed. "What are you talking about, senior? A martial artist's journey in the martial world has always been one man's journey. One has to rely on oneself for everything. If one were to rely on someone else, they're destined not to go too far once they're worried." As he spoke, he waved. "Senior, we'll meet again next time." As his voice trailed off, he turned and left gracefully, not taking a single cloud with him. As they watched Yun Yang's silhouette disappear into the entrance, one of the shadows asked in confusion, "Stellar Lord, this child is so righteous. Why didn't you tell him that he's already blessed by God? Blessed by God means that he has an immortal body. This is also our repayment to him. Why didn't you tell him? This is also the only compensation we can do for our benefactor. Blessed by God? It's just our gratitude. Perhaps it's a great benefit to others, but it's not important to him." The old man shook his head and said, "He didn't ask for anything in return when he helped us. He just wanted to help us. This kind of benevolent heart, this kind of state of mind, is the most precious and flawless heart. It's also because his heart is complete and flawless that he can carry out what he thinks is right to the end, not for benefits or hardships. If we tell him that he's already blessed by God because he helped us, then we'll be destroying his flawless state of mind instead. He's doing this without any selfish motives. He's only doing it for the sake of helping those in danger. How could he be greedy for our repayment? I hope that he'll continue to roam the martial world and do everything with this flawless and guiltless mentality. The elder smiled and said, "This is the only thing we can do for him. I hope you won't destroy it." All the shadows nodded. Everyone thought about what the leading elder had said seriously. Everyone knew how to speak the truth, but knowing and understanding it was one thing. Those who knew how to apply it correctly were few and far between. Yunyang exited the god's grave empty-handed. With a swing of his saber, hundreds of thousands of saber energies rampaged. Cracks appeared in the vacuum, intertwining and forming a black hole. Yunyang was still worried, so he tried to use the previous method to open the god's grave, only to find that he could not open it. "I hope you can rest in peace inside. Within 100 years, I'll return the rest of the god's bones intact." The doomsday of the gods will not come true, Yunyang prayed silently in his heart. Then, the purple silhouette leisurely walked past, still not taking a single cloud with it. In the spacious lay residence, only a portion of the old, weak, sick, women, and children were left. Everyone looked at this silhouette with a fearful gaze. Yunyang had only walked past them, but everyone could not help but tremble. They had a thought in their hearts. The person in front of them was a devil that they could not fight against. Just yesterday, he slaughtered more than 3,000 people from the Lei family without batting an eyelid. Yunyang quietly returned to Lei Dongtian's small courtyard. Lei Dongtian was not resting. Although he was lying on the bed with his eyes closed, his face was full of gloom. Obviously, he was plotting something. Yunyang walked in slowly. Lei Dongtian only moved his eyeballs and glanced at him. Although it was just a glimpse, Yunyang could acutely feel that Lei Dongtian's gaze was completely different from before. There was no longer the deep friendship of a brother in his gaze, only hatred that was etched into his bones. The previous friendly gaze was nowhere to be seen. Yunyang frowned, but his heart relaxed a little. "Brother Lei." Yunyang walked in. "You're awake?" Lei Dongtian snorted and turned to look at Yunyang. His face was full of joy and surprise. "Brother Yun, you're back? Did you get the god's bones?" This exclamation of joy was full of hypocrisy. Yunyang looked at Lei Dongtian for a moment and suddenly smiled. He said faintly, "Brother Lei, your backlash has been lifted? So soon?" Lei Dongtian's expression suddenly became flustered. He stared at Yunyang and asked, "What backlash?" Yunyang smiled faintly and said, "Brother Lei, don't lie in front of a smart person. It's very boring. Do you think you can fool me? That you want me to work for you?" Lei Dongtian was silent. Yunyang said regretfully, "It's a pity that Brother Lei's state of mind hasn't recovered at the right time. The kindness you've expressed to me previously came from your heart. It's hard for me to kill you. At the very least, you could have obtained a painless death. But what can you do now, filled with resentment and rage? You're just going to another world with such negative emotions. Why do you have to do this?" Lei Dongtian gritted his teeth. "Yunyang, I've always treated you as a friend, a brother," Yunyang chuckled. "I've never denied it. Whether it was your deliberate act in Tianxian continent, using me as a cauldron, or the backlash of the cultivation method and how you treated me wholeheartedly, it was all the result of your own choice. What does it have to do with anyone else?" Lei Dongtian raised his head in shock. When you chose me to be your cauldron on the first day, I already knew what was going on. You were just feigning civility." Yunyang said slowly, "Back then, I wasn't strong enough and could only deal with you. Now, the situation is reversed. It's your life that's hanging in my hands. However, I'm curious about something else, the backlash caused by the 7 emotions praxis. When you saw me again, the backlash suddenly broke out. However, it's only been a few days and it's all gone. It's not without reason. What is it? Lei Dongtian's face was dark, his eyes staring at Yun Yang like 2 black holes. Yun, you actually came with Lei Mufeng, didn't you? He did not wait for Yun Yang to answer and said directly, everything that's happened to the Lei family now is all because of the 2 of you colluding and coveting the opportunity. First, you appeared to attract attention to confirm the situation and the Lei family's current real combat power. After confirming it, Lei Mufeng made his move and annihilated the entire Lei family. What the 2 of you have done, it's simply deliberate and heartless. You're not human. Lei Dongtian gritted his teeth in hatred. Yun Yang smiled faintly. Yun Yang smiled faintly and said, Brother Lei is flattering us. What are our tricks? When your father colluded with others to harm our family head and even killed Lei Mufeng's parents and siblings, did he not realize his own scheming and insanity? Who's the one who's even more inhumane? Lei Dongtian looked at him with resentment and suddenly shouted hysterically, I'm blind. I actually know you. Yun Yang sighed. You're blind indeed. If you weren't, how could you have chosen me to be your cauldron the first time we met? If it wasn't for this, who knows who would know who you are? He seemed to be deep in thought as he said, you've already regained your consciousness, yet you don't want to escape. Instead, you're still staying here. It should be because you've lost too much blood. Your profound energy has been completely depleted, so you don't have the strength to escape even if you wanted to. As for the backlash, you'll only be able to face the backlash if you have a high cultivation base. In your current state, you're basically crippled. Are you telling me that the backlash is gone as well? He grabbed Lei Dongtian's wrist and checked. As expected, Lei Dongtian's power was gone. Even his physical strength was extremely weak. He was basically a useless man. I see. It's probably because my cultivation base has fallen to a low point, and I don't have any mystical chi or spiritual power left. So, the backlash is gone. I'm the one who's overthinking things. Yun Yang sighed and said with a face full of pity, Lei Dongtian, luck really isn't up to you. If you've always maintained that sense of loyalty, I'll feel unbalanced even if I kill you, and I'll feel sorry for your sincerity. Now that you've woken up, you're destined to die a horrible death. I'll kill a fake brother for my real brother. I won't be merciful. What do you think? Lei Dongtian glared at him and growled like a wolf, do it. Why aren't you killing me yet? What's the point of me living like this? What's the difference between me and being dead? How can there be no point in living? Don't you still have God's grave? Yun Yang said patiently. A glimmer of hope flashed in Lei Dongtian's eyes. You've got God's bones? I've indeed found God's grave, but I didn't bring back any piece of God's bones. God's bones are what you need. Why would I really fulfill your wish? Yun Yang said regretfully, when I heard you mention that you could use God's bones to recover and even increase your ability, how could I not react and completely eliminate this hidden danger? So I followed your instructions and found God's grave. Then I destroyed the entrance permanently. He said regretfully, it's such a pity. No one can enter such a wonderful place in the future. Lei Dongtian stared at him, his eyes unblinking. The crack in space has eliminated the entrance directly. Sigh. Yun Yang sighed. I didn't want this to happen either. You must be very disappointed, but I can't console you. Pfft. Lei Dongtian spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked at Yun Yang in grief and indignation, his fingers trembling. There was hope in the midst of despair, but it disappeared right after. He was plunged into an atmosphere of extreme despair without any hope. This was probably Lei Dongtian's current situation. Don't be indignant. Yunyang slapped his head, splattering his brains with a loud crack. Your grief and indignation now can only increase my pleasure, but I don't want to get carried away by your flattery. If I get carried away by your indignation, it'll be a huge disadvantage for me as I roam the martial world. A man can be proud, confident, and even arrogant, but he can never be complacent and think too highly of himself. Lei Dongtian only twitched a little before he stopped moving. I really didn't want to kill you so soon. However, the things that your family has done make me really unable to resist the urge to eliminate you all. An unprecedentedly strong air of karma surged into the deific consciousness space the moment a certain person's breath died. Emmy cried out in surprise, just half more and it would be enough to level up. The corners of Yunyang's lips twitched. F***ck, such a huge harvest was only half of it. This level up was really slow. Still, I've gotten rid of you. When I see Lingxi, I should report this good news to her. The Lei family's ancestral hall. Smoke filled the air. Lei Dongtian, his father, and the others were naturally not qualified to enter this place again. The memorial tablet at the front was Lei Juanping's memorial tablet that Lei Junming had long thrown away. Beside him were Lei Muyu, Lei Muyun, Lei Mufeng. The memorial tablets of third granduncle and the others were also placed in a more eye-catching position. Yunyang lit the incense piously. I wish for sixth brother's family to be reunited. If you feel this wish, please be comforted. Xiaojiu will help you end this grudge. I hope that we can still be brothers in our next life. I'll wait for you. The tombstones of Lei Mufeng's family members were also re-erected in the Lei family's graveyard. I hope that the Lei family can live your life well in the future. Walk the right path and don't go down the wrong path. Looking at the remaining people of the Lei family, Yunyang said in a low voice. He did not advise them. For these women and children of the Lei family, advice was useless and meaningless. There was only irreconcilable hatred between them. Even if Yunyang had thousands of words of advice, the Lei family would only obey them. At the end of the day, the future of the Lei family was in their hands. As for Yunyang, he would not care about all the decisions of the Lei family. In the future, when the Lei family walked the right path, Yunyang would send someone to help them. However, if they walked the wrong path or insisted on seeking revenge, Yunyang would not be merciful. Today, I will let you live because you are sixth brother's family members. If you seek revenge against me in the future, then I will carry out the last instruction of the Lei family, kill all of you. Everything depends on yourself. Yunyang did not follow his third granduncle's instructions and annihilate every single member of the Lei family, regardless of their size. After all, this was sixth brother's family. If he really killed them all, it would completely cut off the bloodline of sixth brother's family. With only these women and children left in the Lei family, it would take a very, very long time for them to rise again. Your future path can only depend on your own choices. Work hard and walk on your own path. The moment Yunyang walked out of the Lei family's door, he saw three people. 2 men and a woman. The one in the lead was a woman, graceful and beautiful. Who else could she be but Miss Bai, who lived in the Lei family's plum garden? On both sides of Miss Bai were 2 men who were slowly approaching. Yunyang did not know them, but they should be Miss Bai's companions. Sect leader Yun, you are really ruthless. Miss Bai was dressed in white. She looked at Yunyang coldly, her eyes filled with an unconcealable murderous intent. I didn't expect that the foppish playboy whom Lei Dongtian regards as his own brother is actually the rising star of our bound of universe who has recently risen to fame, the new leader of a middle-class celestial luck banner. He is indeed a famous figure. Yunyang said faintly, since you know that you are a big shot, then cut the nonsense. My time is very precious. Do you want to worship me up close? I can give you some time. considering that we have known each other for a while." He looked at Miss Bai. From the beginning until now, he had felt an inexplicable aura from her. Yunyang did not like this aura. However, he did not understand what kind of aura it was. Miss Bai's pretty face grew colder. She sneered and said, "Sect leader Yun, you have made a name for yourself at a young age. The residence of 9 Supremes has been promoted 3 times in a day, straight to the middle class. Your future is extremely bright, and you can be said to be a new legend in the bound of universe. However, I really don't know if you are lucky or unfortunate to die here today." Yunyang was not offended at all. He laughed heartily and said, "If the few of you have the ability to kill me, why would you wait until now to appear? Why raise your status and make a fool of yourselves?" Once he said that, the 3 men's faces darkened. Honestly, none of them wanted to appear so late. It was not that they were not capable enough or brave enough, but it was because of a freak combination of factors that they had hit the mark by a stroke of luck. In the beginning, they did not know Yunyang's identity. Although they were vigilant, they did not take Yunyang seriously. They did not want to lose the big picture because of a small mistake and cause their plan to be biased. In fact, they had already gone to inquire about Yunyang's news at the first instance. Otherwise, they would not have learned of Yunyang's specific information after only a day, and they would not have rushed over to investigate. They could only blame Yunyang for acting too quickly. By the time Miss Bai and the others arrived, the entire Lei residence had already turned into a sea of blood. All the core members of the Lei family were completely wiped out. The only survivor, Lei Dongtian, had his leg broken and was crippled. It was an unimaginable feat, logically speaking, with Lei Dongtian's attitude towards Yunyang. Even if this young Master Yun had something to do, he would at least inquire about the news in the Lei residence and confirm the situation. After a few days, he would make some preparations before taking any specific action. This was human nature and the norm of things. Who would have thought that this sect leader Yun would be so impatient? He had just met Lei Dongtian during the day, called him brother, and went to see Lei Dongtian's sweetheart together. It was only at night that he started killing without a word. There was no hesitation when he raised the butcher's knife, killing everything along the way. They were still waiting for the news from above, but before the news arrived, the Lei family had already been slaughtered cleanly. Who do you think you can reason with about this? The previous news was that a young man named Yunyang, who was on good terms with Lei Dongtian, had come to the Lei residence. Please investigate Yunyang's background and see if you need to take him down to avoid deviating from the established plan. The reply was as follows: Yunyang, the leader of the newly promoted residence of 9 Supremes, a middle-class celestial luck banner sect. Since he had come to the Lei residence and was on good terms with Lei Dongtian, there was no need to care about him. Yes, there was no need to care about this news. After receiving the news, there was no need to care. After knowing his identity, there was no need to care. As for making friends, who could be sure? Then, they suddenly heard a scream in the middle of the night. Then, they sent people to investigate and found out that the Lei residents had been slaughtered in the early hours of the morning. It was not that they did not want to stop it, but it was too late. Not only had it happened, it was already over. However, the reply from above was clear: leave him alone. What should we do about this? Miss Bai and the others naturally asked again. Yunyang had slaughtered the entire Lei family, leaving only Lei Dongtian alive with a broken leg. Ask for follow-up instructions. Should we still leave him alone? This time, there was no reply for a long time. It was not until the sun was high up in the sky that they finally received a reply: lad, you spoiled my plan. Kill Yunyang and bring Lei Dongtian back. Only after receiving specific instructions did they set out. However, when they arrived, Lei Dongtian with a broken leg was also dead. Again, what should we do about this? The entire Lei family was left with the old, the weak, the sick, women, and children. The oldest child was only 8 or 9 years old, and he was of poor aptitude. There was no point in nurturing him. Young Miss Bai and the others had been inspecting carefully and they were already unable to restrain their anger. It was too much. Although they did not know what the higher-ups wanted to do with the Lei family, their rage after knowing that the Lei family had been annihilated was undeniable. Otherwise, they would not have killed Yun Yang, the leader of the residents of 9 Supremes, who was in the limelight. The few of them came in a hurry, afraid that Yun Yang would be one step ahead of them and leave without a trace. However, they were also afraid that they would implicate the remaining members of the Lei family when the battle started and further ruin the higher-ups' plan. Therefore, they chose to guard the door and wait for Yun Yang to come out. The remaining members of the Lei family were too weak. Once the battle started, even the slightest shockwave would be enough to kill them all. Yet, they did not know that the remaining people were of no use to the higher-ups. Yun Yang, why did you do this? Why have you done so much? Extreme resentment shone in Miss Bai's eyes. She could imagine what kind of punishment she would receive when she returned due to the failure of this mission. She was truly indignant. Everything had been going smoothly before this. It had been more than 2 years of smooth sailing. Had she slacked off? Why? Miss Bai, you've stayed by Lei Dongtian's side for quite some time. How can you not know what kind of family the Lei family is? How can they not have any enemies? No one came looking for the Lei family previously, not because their enemies did not want to, but because they did not have the ability to do so. I'm different from other enemies. I have the ability to seek revenge. Since I'm seeking revenge, how can I not end this grudge once and for all? Yun Yang smiled gently. You guys came with such fanfare, it's obvious that you're determined to win. It looks like you must avenge Lei Dongtian. I thought Miss Bai was just playing around with Lei Dongtian, but it turns out that you have such deep feelings for him. I've been too narrow-minded. Miss Bai almost vomited. Deep feelings for Lei Dongtian? How could it be? That fellow was like a fly. If it were not for the mission, she would have killed him with a slap long ago. You annihilate an entire family at the slightest provocation. Such a heartless act makes you the public enemy of the bound of universe. Miss Bai was enraged as she said, everyone has the right to kill such a vicious thief. Kill him. With a wave of her hand, the 2 men beside her leaped forward in unison. Once both of them attacked, they crossed their arms in front of their chests and pushed them forward. 2 waves of heaven and earth cage came crashing down at the same time, targeting Yun Yang. One of them waved his right hand and a 9-jointed white bone whip lashed out with the sound of thunder while the other wielded a strange-looking sword that moved like a snake, attacking all the vital points on Yun Yang's upper body in an unpredictable manner. Yun Yang snorted coldly. With a casual grab, he had already crushed the 2 heaven and earth cages. With a soft bang, his aura skyrocketed with unprecedented power. In the next moment, Yun Yang grabbed the tip of the 9-jointed bone whip and pulled the burly man over with a reverse tug, turning to face the eerie snake sword. The man wielding the oddly shaped sword retreated hastily, but Yun Yang appeared by his side like a phantom and said faintly, "This sword isn't bad. Let me play with it." The man felt his wrist go numb and the strange sword in his hand flew out of his grasp. As he retreated in shock, he saw that his treasured sword was already in Yun Yang's hand. With a wave of his hand, the sword came down on his head. He had actually used the flexible sword as a saber. Although it was a sword-saber technique and its attribute did not match, the strange sword's power was multiplied by several folds under the infusion of Yun Yang's powerful mystical qi. With a swoosh, the head of the man wielding the 9-jointed bone whip had already been chopped off. The moment Yun Yang's strike landed, he felt an inexplicable aura permeating the air. His hair stood on end and he was inexplicably agitated. Yun Yang released his deific consciousness to investigate the situation within 1,000 feet radius. He was shocked to find that the decapitated man, who should have been dead for sure, was still breathing. There was no blood coming out of his neck, only an eerie mist that continued to spread. After a few breaths, another head popped out with a swoosh, its eyes glinting menacingly. And this new head that popped out was a cat's head. After the new cat's head popped out, it turned into a human's head after a few turns. What else could it be if it did not look like the burly man? An indescribable, eerie aura spread. Miss Bai and the man whose sword Yun Yang had snatched from wore an extremely ugly expression. Yun Yang took 3 steps back in shock, his expression grim. Cat's head, demonic aura. You guys are actually the demon race. His gaze towards Miss Bai suddenly became unprecedentedly dangerous. Demon race, what is your intention in sneaking into the bound of universe and coming to the lay residence? He suddenly felt that he seemed to have unintentionally foiled an important plan of the demon race. Chapter 1174. In the main text, there are 2 of my most recent insights. I don't know if you can see them. This little new year, it's hard to explain. I got up in the morning and wrote 4,000 words. Sect leader Wei came to find me and said, "Let's play landlord." So I played landlord. I played until 11:30. I played landlord for 5 yuan and lost 200. 1 bomb for 10 yuan, 2 bombs for 15 yuan, 3 bombs for 20 yuan. I can lose 200 in this way. With my gambling skills, can you believe it? So I said, I'll write first. I'll take a break and play again when I'm lucky. Then I ate lunch and wrote 3,000 words. They said, I'll play for a while. So I thought it made sense and started landlord again. Then, I lost 160 in half an hour. I thought, you guys are bullying me, right? So I said, you guys can play landlord first. I'll write for a while to make up for my losses, another 3,000 words. It was already 4:30 in the afternoon. I wrote 10,000 words and felt very tired. So I said, let's play landlord. I lost 200 in half an hour. That's weird. I usually don't lose. Then I kept playing, all the way until the last hand. I picked up the cards and looked at them. Royals, 222, AA, 3333, 4556, 89. Let me ask you, if you had these cards in your hands, would you call for landlord? So I called. I called for A2J, I had 3 bombs. What would you do? Of course, you'd get a 4, right? Then the next player got an A, hold on. If you were me, would you defuse the bomb? Not willing to? Then I said you'd do it. Then I met a ghost. The next player, 777,888,999, flew 3 times, with 3 orders. Damn it, what the hell? I used 3333 to blow it up. Then the next player got 4 tens and blew it up. What should I do? Of course, I used king to blow it up, right? Then I got a 6, the next player got a J, then the next player got 4 QS and blew it up. I didn't dare to blow it back. The previous player got a pair, which I couldn't afford. The next player got a pair of J, which I had 1 left. Then I couldn't afford a pair of aces. In the end, the previous player got 4 kings and blew it up again. I had 5 5 8 9 2 2 2 2 left in my hands. Then the next player got an order, sigh, I didn't say any more. Anyway, I lost this card, then I drove them all away. I wrote more than 3,000 in one night. After updating, I kept thinking about this card. Damn it. I kept thinking about it until now. I've been thinking about it for the past year, and I'm not happy at all. What am I supposed to do? Only then could he win, remember the mobile URL, Happy Little New Year to everyone. P1/1, bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 1175. The plot outline was written clearly that Lei Dongtian still had to deal with the karma of his pursuit with Ji Lingxi in the future, which meant that Lei Dongtian scenes were set to follow. However, I was so happy when I wrote it yesterday that I killed him. Then, the Lei family would be in cahoots with the demon race. Then, I wrote that I was so happy that I killed the entire Lei family. I'm so worried now. The demon race is out, but there's no Lei family in the follow-up plot. Let me think of a way. My head is splitting. It's mainly because I was so happy yesterday that I published the entire script. Extreme joy turns to sorrow. How can I make up for it? I'll think of it tomorrow and write it. My head is in a knot today. If the other Lei families are involved, then it's meaningless for this Lei family to return to the family. However, if this Lei family is only left with the old, weak, sick, and disabled, and the description is so clear, there's no way to develop it. This whole thing is so smooth that I can write hundreds of thousands of words of plot, but I'm so happy that I've written it all out. Chapter 1176. Miss Bai's face was ashen as she hollered, "Nonsense! Yunyang, you're the demon. You came to the Lei family and annihilated an entire family, revealing the demon race's savage nature. Today, we shall enforce justice on behalf of the heavens and annihilate this villain." Following her howl, 7 to 8 silhouettes leaped over and attacked Yunyang in unison without a word. At the same time, Miss Bai let out a loud cry as a jade-green vine appeared in her palm. There were 7 to 8 unusually green leaves on it as she tossed them towards Yunyang. Miss Bai was not an ordinary demon, but a plant demon that was even rarer than the Golden Condor King. Miss Bai's first move was a killing move. As soon as the vine went into the air, it suddenly turned into a sky full of green leaves that fell down, covering an area of 1,000 feet. It was a large area of effect attack. Yunyang was surprised, but he did not slow down. He raised the divine edge in his hand, the merciless saber and the merciless Dao were executed. Countless vines and branches fell from the sky as the dense saber glint flew over. Yunyang was also retreating quickly, obviously trying to escape from the other party's attack range. Yunyang had been a formidable foe for a long time. He had to think of defeat before thinking of victory. Before he understood the other party's background, he had to be careful and not lose. There was most likely something fishy about the other party's attack range. It was better to observe the situation first before making further plans. The moment Yunyang responded to the attack, thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind. The demon race? How could there be the demon race in the bound of universe's human territory? Moreover, it was not just one or two of them. The people who surrounded him were all from the demon race, and their combat power was not ordinary either. Just thinking about it was frightening. As the saying goes, one can see the big picture from the small clues. With such a large group of monster clan lurking here, with Miss Bai's cultivation and ability, she did not hesitate to spend so many years to set up a trap and deliberately make friends with Lei Dongtian. If one were to say that there was no big scheme behind it, it would not make sense. Moreover, although Miss Bai's strength was the strongest among all the demon clan members, since she had personally come here and used herself as bait, it could be concluded that she was definitely not the leader. In other words, there was at least a mastermind behind Miss Bai. Then, how high would the identity of the mastermind be? How strong would he be? What exactly were they plotting? Yunyang's saber danced as he defended himself against the 8 demons' attacks. While he was careful, his thoughts were running wild. The Lei family returned to the family 3 years ago and changed from a third-rate family to a descendant of the Sacred Heart Palace's great elder Lei Qianli's favor and inheritance. according to Lei Dongtian, this Miss Bai came here less than 3 years ago. Her true identity is a demon. It's not difficult to tell from her words and actions that she has ulterior motives towards Lei Dongtian and the Lei family. Moreover, there's obviously someone higher up behind her. She's just someone who follows orders. The Sacred Heart Palace's great elder, Miss Bai, the demon race, could there be any connection between these three? If we include the Sacred Heart Palace's master Zhan Wufei's secret mission, the Sacred Heart Palace's spies, and the recent frequent actions of the demon race, could there be other mysteries behind all of these? Although everything is complicated and messy, it's not impossible to sort them out. Among these, Yunyang was deep in thought, summarizing all the information he had on hand and sorting out the crux of the matter. Should I kill all these demons? It's not appropriate. Yunyang had a plan in mind. With his current cultivation base, Miss Bai and the other demons' combat power was not ordinary, but it was nothing to Yunyang. If he really went all out, he could kill all of them in 100 breaths' time. However, if he really did so, all the clues would be cut off and it would be difficult to continue. I have to think of a way. The 8 demons closed in on Yunyang with a series of killer moves, wanting nothing more than to kill Yunyang. Yunyang kept retreating. It looked like he was surrounded by danger, constantly walking between life and death, but in fact, he was at ease. It looked dangerous, but he was actually safe. At the moment when the fight was about to end, Miss Bai's jade-like hand flew over like a butterfly and met Yunyang's palm with a loud bang. Yunyang grunted and a trace of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. He staggered backward and was almost dismembered by the demons when he lost his balance. Seeing this, Miss Bai's heart was at ease. She spun around and shouted, "Go again. Those who kill him will be rewarded handsomely." Through the exchange of blows just now, she could clearly judge that although sect leader Yun's cultivation was not low and had already reached the level of a 3rd-grade Saint King, he was still a notch lower than her who was at the peak of a 3rd-grade Saint King. Judging from the result of their exchange, not only did she have an easy time, she had also injured her opponent and his combat power was no longer at its peak. Following Miss Bai's command, the other 7 people howled in unison, their swords and sabers falling down, their eyes filled with murderous intent. Yunyang seemed to be in a precarious situation as he struggled and dodged with all his might, putting up a stubborn resistance. Even though he struggled and dodged with all his might, streaks of blood continued to fly and he could no longer avoid them completely like before. Boom, 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 after a dozen consecutive clashes, Yunyang howled in agony as he was flung away like a kite with its string snapped. However, Miss Bai was already a step ahead of him and had arrived at the other end of Yunyang. With a loud bang, it was another exchange of blows. Yunyang tried his best to block it but heard a crack as if his entire arm had been broken. However, he straightened himself in mid-air and strangely turned in another direction, fleeing for his life towards the open space. In a flash, he had already gone 400 to 500 feet away. It seemed to be some kind of arcane skill that stimulated his life force, and he was determined to fight. Miss Bai was, of course, unwilling to let Yunyang escape, but she had been thrown to the other side by Yunyang's near-death experience, unable to move immediately. She hollered, "This rascal is already severely injured. He can't run far. Go after him, don't let him escape." The 7 demons obeyed and moved, turning into streaks of shadows in an instant, giving chase at lightning speed. Yunyang sprinted swiftly, displaying his extraordinary and ever-changing movement skills and his unpredictability. Even when there were 8 silhouettes trailing behind him, he could always find a sliver of hope and escape from the most impossible situation with his slippery skills. This infuriated the few people behind him so much that they almost spat blood. Just as they were about to catch him, he turned and ran again. Just as they were about to kill him, he slipped away again. Are you AF * King Loach? Chapter 1177. Miss Bai and the rest of the group of 8 pursued Yun Yang all the way. Seeing that Yun Yang's injuries were getting more and more severe, they became more desperate and refused to give up. Even when he was coughing up blood, he could still escape. The chase went on for a good half an hour before it came to an end as Yun Yang darted into a dense forest with a swoosh. All the demons could hear was a rustling sound as it disappeared into the distance. Then, there was no more sound. Of course, the demons would not give up just like that. They attacked in unison. With a loud bang, countless saber lights, sword shadows, palm strikes, and claws enveloped half of the dense forest, pulverizing countless trees within the attack range. It was a pity that other than some small animals and birds that were running for their lives, there was no other presence in the forest. It was as if Yun Yang had vanished into thin air the moment he entered the forest. Search. Miss Bai's face was ashen, her expression cold and her gaze fierce. Yun Yang is already on the brink of death. Although he has a chance to catch his breath, he can't have gone far. He must still be somewhere in this forest. Dig him out even if we have to dig 3 feet into the ground today. Yes. Over the next 4 hours, the 8 demonic race experts had smashed the entire forest into smithereens. Every inch of the ground had been turned over at least 100 feet of space, but Yun Yang was nowhere to be found. Not even a trace of blood could be found. Miss Bai's gaze swept across the land that had been turned upside down and could no longer be called a forest. A look of admiration even appeared on her exquisite face. No wonder you were able to escape the Golden Condor King's pursuit for thousands of miles. This method of escaping is truly extraordinary. However, since we know that you're in this area, you can't escape death even if you turn into dust. That night, Miss Bai and the others stayed here and continued their search in 8 different directions. They searched inch by inch, not letting go of any suspicious spots. During this period of time, even a cat's meow would cause a huge commotion. It was obvious that they were determined to end Yun Yang's chances of survival. However, an entire day and night had passed and there was still no trace of Yun Yang, as if he no longer existed in this world. Miss Bai and the rest of the 8 of them were so tired that they stuck out their tongues. They looked at the dense forest in front of them. No, this place could no longer be considered a dense forest. Under the continuous destruction of the great forces, it had long been smashed into a barren desert. It had even expanded to nearly twice its original size. It was a completely barren land. However, all of them had looks of disbelief on their faces. How did this guy survive such a search and hide so well? This method of concealment was simply, previously, he was seriously injured, right? Did we severely injure him? It should be. Their voices were filled with uncertainty. Faced with the inexplicable reality, they all began to doubt themselves. Did they not hit him at all? Was he not injured at all? Or perhaps he was hiding some kind of miraculous movement speed secret technique and had long escaped from this area. Otherwise, the current situation would be too strange. Miss Bai's expression grew darker. As someone who had the most direct combat contact with Yun Yang, she was absolutely certain that Yun Yang had been severely injured previously. This was absolutely true. However, why could they not find him? That's the strange part. She had already been questioned twice in 1 day and 1 night. The higher-ups were infuriated as they continued to berate her. Has the murderer of the Lei family been killed? We're still pursuing him. Has he been killed? We're still pursuing him. We haven't confirmed it yet, she was scolded relentlessly. By Bing Xian. Do you King want to die? Why do you have to force your father to swear? If you don't want to live, just say it. Miss Bai did not want to die at all, so she wanted to capture Yun Yang and kill him even more. However, the reality now was that she could not even see a trace of Yun Yang's shadow. After tormenting herself until dawn, Miss Bai Bingxian, and her 7 subordinates gathered in the tent, exhausted, to brainstorm and discuss the next steps. Where has Yun Yang been hiding? All 8 of them could not figure it out. He looked like he was on the brink of death. Where could he be hiding? How could there be such a strange thing in this world? It was inexplicable, inconceivable, and incomprehensible. Just as they were puzzled, a faint wisp of cloud chi was already hidden in the tent they had set up temporarily. Did Yun Yang intentionally avoid the demon's search? Absolutely not. Yun Yang had transformed into his cloud form the moment he snuck into the forest and followed behind Miss Bai when the demons were searching for him. He had heard every single word of her questioning, including the 2 times she had questioned him. He had clearly seen Bai Bingxian take out a strange black, shuttle-shaped mystical crystal. After channeling mystical chi for some time, the tip of the shuttle gradually glowed. Then, Bai Bingxian began to report the current situation to the shuttle. She put it down after she was done. When the shuttle glowed again without warning, she channeled mystical chi into it again. An angry reprimanding voice could be heard. Have you found him now? Have you killed that child? A bunch of trash. Tell me, what else can you do? Bai Bingxian had been standing respectfully before the shuttle the entire time, accepting the reprimand. After the reprimand was done, she put it down and channeled mystical chi into it again to light it up.